Don't miss out on your chance to win a whopping £30,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. It's extra cash that could really make a difference to your coming year. You could find yourself on that holiday you've always wanted to take, buy that treat that always seemed out of reach, or just send some of those day-to-day financial stresses packing. £30,000 could be yours. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 12 o'clock on Tuesday, the 6th of August. I'm Emily Carver.
And I'm Cameron Walker.
Britain in chaos. Nearly 400 arrests have now been made as violent protests enter their 7th day. Dozens are being charged across the country, but with prisons at near full capacity, where on earth will they go?
And a war of words. Number 10 has condemned comments made by billionaire Elon Musk, claiming civil war is inevitable in the UK, as well as slamming suggestions that there is a two-tier policing system.
And the lawyer for the family who clashed with police officers at Manchester Airport last month has spoken out at a televised press conference with fresh allegations. We'll have the latest.
And the silver girl turns golden. Keely Hodgkinson emerged victorious at the Olympic 800-metre final in Paris last night, cruising across the finish line in under 2 minutes. Very impressive.
Less than 2 minutes.
That's very impressive.
It's very impressive.
Yeah, I don't think I could run it that quickly.
I mean, that is just a full-on sprint, really, isn't it?
Absolutely. The amount of training you have to do for that as well is just incredible. And the pressure she was under to get a gold, but she absolutely smashed it.
Absolutely smashed it. So there you go. There's some good news for you because, of course, it does look like Britain is very much in chaos. And we have a question for you today. There seems to have been a bit of a disagreement when it comes to what these protests are and whether these latest riots can be called terrorism. Now, we've had the government's independent review of terror legislation saying that caution must be exercised in labelling these recent bouts of protests as acts of terrorism. Yet you have Neil Basu, who's the former head of counter-terrorism, saying that some of these riots have in fact become terrorism, that they could be classed as terrorism.
Yes, so send us your views and on that. And of course, you can go on the GB News website, gbnews.com/yoursay for your views on that.
Yes, indeed you can. Please do get in touch. Do you think it's right to class these latest riots as terrorism? Of course, we have seen arson, we have seen racist attacks, we have seen huge amounts of public disorder. We've also seen counter-protests, of course, last night in Birmingham, to say the least. So a lot going on.
And what has been fanning the flames online as well? Lots of people not specifically taking part in these riots or protests, but of course, a lot of people fanning the flames on social media.
Well, get in touch, gbnews.com/yoursay, but let's have the headlines with Sam Francis.
Cameron, Emily, thank you very much, and good afternoon to you. Just coming up to 3 minutes past 12. The top story this afternoon: the government is now suggesting courts could begin sitting through the night as hundreds of arrests have been made since disorder broke out a week ago in response to the stabbings in Southport. It's understood now more than 500 additional prison places are being prepared as thousands of specialist police officers hit the streets to deal with rioters. Overnight, fireworks, stones, glass bottles and bricks were thrown in Devon in another night of unrest and disorder. 6 people in Plymouth were arrested and at least 3 officers there were injured. Disorder also broke out in Belfast, with footage online showing petrol bombs and missiles being thrown at police. Well, we're also just hearing from the courts in Liverpool that a 15-year-old boy has pleaded guilty to violent disorder following the scenes in the city centre there on Saturday. He was identified, they say, from a TikTok video. The boy, who can't be named because of his age, has just been appearing at Liverpool Magistrates Court. We will keep across that for you. Meanwhile, Elon Musk has criticised the Prime Minister, responding to a tweet from Sir Keir Starmer about protecting Muslim communities. The owner of social media platform X wrote, "Shouldn't you be concerned about attacks on all communities?" Yesterday, he also condemned a video showing violence in Liverpool, commented on a video from Liverpool, saying civil war in the UK is inevitable. Eluned Morgan has been selected as First Minister of Wales, the first woman to be holding that role. She was confirmed in a vote of the Senedd members earlier, after the Welsh Parliament was recalled from summer recess. The leader of Welsh Labour marked the occasion in her speech, declaring the grey suits are out, as she hopes to add, she says, a vibrant splash of colour to the role. Shocking levels of chaos at Wandsworth Prison are taking place in plain view of leaders, a new report by the prison's watchdog has revealed. The prison's inspector found the London jails not safe, with rampant violence, drug use and overcrowding. Despite nearly £900,000 being invested since the alleged escape of Daniel Khalif, staff still failed to account for prisoners during the day. The Ministry of Justice is promising £100 million for improvement, but critics are calling for an urgent change in leadership. 3 water companies are facing a combined record fine of £168 million after a series of failings were found, including sewage spills. Thames Water, Northumbrian Water and Yorkshire Water were issued that penalty by the regulator Ofwat, with Thames Water facing the biggest fine, £104 million. Concerns over rising university costs are causing more young people in the UK to skip higher education. That's according to new UCAS figures. The admissions service is reporting a drop in school leavers applying this year. In Scotland today, 145,000 students are receiving their exam results, but 7,000 were met with blank emails because of a distribution fault. The Scottish Conservatives are blaming the SNP for what they've called a chaotic and shambolic situation. The national waiting list for children's gender care in England and Wales has risen despite the opening of 2 new specialist centres. Figures at the end of May showed that there were more than 5,700 young people still on that list. On average, children are having to wait 100 weeks for a first appointment with the NHS England saying it will set out further plans to transform the provision of care in gender services. International news for you, and several US personnel have been injured in a suspected rocket attack at a military base in Iraq. US defence officials say troops at the Al-Assad air base are still assessing the injuries and any damage. It comes, of course, as tensions are rising in the Middle East as leaders of the Lebanese militant group Hezbollah and Hamas have been assassinated last week. In the US, a judge has ruled that Google acted illegally to maintain a monopoly on online searches. They said the tech giant had paid tens of millions of dollars every year to ensure its search engine was the default on smartphones and browsers. Its parent company Alphabet, though, says it will appeal that decision. And an update on the stock markets. They are now starting to bounce back across the world after falling sharply over fears the US economy is heading for a recession. London's FTSE 100 suffered its biggest fall since July last year. And in Asia, shares closed yesterday with a big drop, the biggest fall since 1987's Black Monday. And as we heard from Cameron and Emily, I'll try to sound just as excited as they were. Keely Hodgkinson has become just the 10th British woman to win athletics gold at the Olympics as she stormed to victory in the 800 metres. It was the first global title for the four-time European champion. Emma Finucane, Sophie Capewell and Katie Marchant also set a new world record to win the women's team sprint track cycling. It means Team GB now have 12 gold medals at the Paris Games so far, putting them 5th in the table. Those are the latest headlines for now. I'm Sam Francis. Your next update just after 12:30.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 12:08. Now, riots continue across the nation with scenes of chaos last night in Plymouth, Belfast and Darlington, with almost 400 people arrested in a space of a week. Dozens have been charged today.
Yes, now counter-protesters turned up in Birmingham. They congregated around a roundabout and they appeared to turn on the media as well. Let's take a listen.
Community leaders have been speaking to the police as well because...
Free Palestine! Free Palestine!
But I think, apologies for the language you're hearing, but a sense of the anger I think you can hear there.
Yeah, Katie, I think Becky...
Well, as you can see, violent disorder started last Tuesday following that horrific knife attack in Southport that left 3 children dead and others in hospital.
Now, Christian, Jewish and Muslim leaders have condemned the violence across the nation, calling for a stop to the hatred, violence and also the vandalism. We're joined by GB News political editor Christopher Hope, live from Westminster. Christopher, I believe we're now on the 7th day of this unrest that we're seeing. Huge amounts of violent protest, a huge number of arrests. There have also been dozens of charges brought now. The government's response, of course, there's been a huge amount of criticism, not least over the last couple of days coming from one of the richest men in the world, Elon Musk.
That's right. Hi, Cameron. Hi, Emily. 16,000 cities engulfed by riots in those 8 days now, isn't it, since those dreadful killings in Southport of 3 small children. The government has said, we've heard from them, the Sir Keir Starmer saying he's now got a standing army of public order officers ready to go around the country and ensure that these riots are policed properly and appropriately. There's concern about a so-called 2-tier policing of different groups, whether if it's white boys having doing the violence, then why are they policed differently? Critics say to Asian youths. Of course, the government says that is not the case. They're saying there is no 2-tier policing, but certainly that's what people are saying on social media. And now we hear from Elon Musk, who owns X, formerly Twitter. He said that it looks like the civil war is inevitable in the UK, and certainly he may be judging that from scenes he's seeing on his own Twitter feed, on his own X feed. That's been denied by the government. The official spokesman of the Prime Minister says there's no justification for it, and everyone would agree with that. Also, we heard from Sir Keir Starmer yesterday, the Prime Minister. He said we won't tolerate attacks on mosques or on Muslim communities. And Elon Musk responded to that as well, also on X. He said, shouldn't you be concerned about attacks on all communities, to Sir Keir Starmer? And I wonder whether that response from Elon Musk may get some more favourable hearing from viewers and listeners to GB News who have been telling us they see a double standard in policing. And in fact, we've heard from Suella Braverman, of course, when she was Home Secretary before she was sacked. She said that the police were choosing favourites when they were policing those Palestinian demonstrations last year, although 3 other contenders to be Tory leader have said they don't believe there's two-tier policing in this country. So that is a live debate happening right now, and that's where we are. We're yet to hear from the Home Office or the Home Secretary. I should say, by the way, to both of you, that the Home Office have not put a single minister up to be interviewed on GB News since Labour won the election, and we're trying to make sure that changes. But I think they've got to try and talk to our viewers and our listeners who are deeply concerned about what they see on the streets in this country.
Yes, and they're more than welcome to come on this programme. Chris, it's all very well and good, the government promising thousands of specialist police officers being deployed across the country. But of course, once people are arrested, they've got to go through a very overstretched court system, don't they? The government suggesting this morning that courts could sit overnight to deal with that. But then you have the issue of there's not enough prison spaces. So the governments have got a huge task on their hands, don't they?
Cameron, it's a huge task. Back in 2011, magistrates' courts were able to sit round the clock 24 hours to process individuals arrested during those riots. But we're not there yet. And it's a question for the justice system to allow that to happen. Is they're not doing round-the-clock sittings. They are, if they want to, they can go late into the evening. Of course, Sir Keir Starmer was the Director of Public Prosecutions back in 2011, so he knows that, and he's seeing that as a kind of prosecutorial challenge. We heard from Heidi Alexander, the Justice Minister, the Prisons Minister. She's been telling reporters today that they've found 400 spaces in other prisons, notably in HM Prison Stockton in East Midlands and Cookham Wood in Kent. So they have found other space, but as you say, they are set to start releasing thousands of prisoners next month to relieve pressure on our justice system, on our prison system. And so one wonders how they can find space now and yet release prisons next month.
Yes, very worrying indeed. Thank you very much, Christopher Hope. We'll catch up with you in a little bit, I'm sure. But we're now joined by our national reporter, Charlie Peters, who is on the ground in Birmingham after quite shocking scenes last night, Charlie. Try and describe exactly what happened yesterday afternoon and into the evening.
Well, good afternoon, Cameron, Emily. Well, yes, there were shocking scenes here at the Clumsy Swan pub in Yardley. Last night, a mob descended on this location. They gathered at around 5 p.m. about half a mile away in Bordsley Green for a demonstration which was apparently in retaliation to another protest that was expected to take place there near a McDonald's by a roundabout. We saw some footage, didn't we, yesterday, of journalists being forced off that scene by masked mobs, men actually with machetes and knives gathering there. Now, we understand that mob then moved to this location last night, and we've seen some live-streamed footage of people saying that they were there to assert dominance. They were hunting the EDL, and they were targeting a pub because, in the words of one person who was streaming, they wanted to go after people in a pub because that's where things kick off. Well, who was here last night? It was a karaoke night at the Clumsy Swan. There were families inside here. You can see some of the damage just beside me, where people have been trying to get this window replaced actually today, where a huge mob descended, throwing things in this location as they barricaded themselves inside the pub. Well, earlier today, I actually spoke with Linda, the assistant manager of the pub, who described what it was like last night on the ground here in Yardley. And what was the scene like inside when it started? You told me earlier you were barricading yourselves inside the pub.
Yes, because they were trying to put the doors in.
And how did you barricade the doors?
The tables and chairs and customers and stuff, and just stopped them.
What were you thinking in that moment? Were you terrified they could break in?
Well, yeah, it was scary. I've got kids in there. It was karaoke, there was children in there, staff in there, everything. So, no, it was scary. It was really scary.
Are you going to be trying to tell your customers to reassure people they can come back to this pub after last night?
They already know, because the regulars know the area, they know the pub, but they won't stop them coming in.
Yeah.
They're loyal. They'll be back.
And just describe some of the scenes inside at the time. I mean, it was a karaoke night, you told me earlier. So there were families
the
in there.
karaoke had finished, so that finished at 7. So there were still a few people in and young kids in. So it was really scary for them, more for the kids than anything.
Well, you heard from Chopper, didn't you, just now, that the Home Office hasn't put up any ministers to speak to the media today. But the MP for this area, Jess Phillips, the Labour MP for Yardley, is a Home Office minister, and she said last night that the pub here was locking up as normal. Well, that's certainly not the view of pub workers I've spoken to today. They gathered here last night trying to put this place back together after the shocking attack that they witnessed. We saw footage also of a man being beaten outside just around this location I'm walking past now. Now, some people here are a bit upset with him because they were all locked inside and he went out to goad the crowd and put his arms up, really to tempt them into violence. But that doesn't excuse what followed. He was beaten very hard, pushed to the ground and attacked by that masked mob. Again, many of them with weapons. We've been told this morning by the manager that that man is now okay. Other injuries were sustained inside the pub as people rushed to barricade those doors. You just heard from Linda. She was inside that area, just that door there, forcing furniture against the door to try and keep it safe. And that's obviously been very concerning for people here. They are nervous about what might happen next, and it's been widely considered. People I've spoken to here have said that that's very uncommon for this area. It's usually very peaceful, and what happened here was very shocking.
Well, thank you very much, Charlie Peters there in Birmingham at the scene of those events last night. Thank you. Thank you very much for your report.
Truly shocking. Now, joining us now is the former police officer and managing director of the Public Safety Foundation, Oliver Lawrence. Oliver, thank you for joining us here on GB News. Oliver, the police had a very difficult task last night, but from what we can see from the footage of that event in Birmingham, there didn't seem to be much of a police presence on the ground at the time the attack took place.
Yeah, good afternoon, Emily. Good afternoon, Cameron. Yeah, spontaneous incidents of violence disorders we saw last night are very difficult to respond to. You know, I've been on the show a number of times talking about police resourcing and how we've seen over the coming months and years police officers leaving the vocation in significant numbers. And I think that's really coming to fruition now, where we see a real vulnerability in frontline public order policing over the last week as a result of the tragic deaths of those 3 young children. Policing really grappling with some big challenges, obviously lots of conversation around policing and what that means. So lots of different challenges for policing. But as we're seeing, I think at the moment, the language that everybody's using has really got to be toned back, even from very ex-senior police officers like Neil Basu, language which I find almost inflammatory. You know, we really need to tone that back and understand that that has an impact. And the job now of all of us is to bring people together and to end this
Oliver, what
violence.
kind of language are you talking about? Are you talking about the sort of accusations of two-tier policing? Is that the type of thing?
No, it's the language around far right, those sort of that sort of language is being used far too easily. You know, I think we're looking at opportunistic thugs. There's no doubt that an element of the people attending these protests and these violent disturbances have a far right ideological belief to them. But there are a lot of youngsters, like 14, 15-year-olds involved. These are opportunistic thugs involved in violence who need to be policed robustly. They need to be dealt with, they need to be put before the courts. But the language we use is very important in terms of just toning this all right back.
Yeah, I mean, of course, what happened in Birmingham was a little bit different. As I understand, or what appears to have happened, is that these mostly Asian lads who congregated at this roundabout, they thought, or they'd heard, or they were expecting there to be, okay, what you could call far-right protesters there. And so they congregated to, in quotation marks, you know, protect their community or defend themselves. There was no such protest that they were met with. So they were just congregated there, waving flags, balaclavas covering their faces, reports of those with some weapons as well. It was all sort of, there weren't any violence, but then it sort of descended as the hours went on. Why wasn't there a police presence when it was sort of in that calm state?
I think, Emily, that's an incredibly good question. I think that's something for police to review over the coming days as to the lack of policing response. I think what policing often struggles with is its ability to communicate out why it makes certain decisions. And obviously that only fuels this whole two-tier policing mentality that it exists in society. I don't buy into it myself, but I can understand the scepticism from the public in terms of the fact it does exist. You know, this hasn't all turned up as of yesterday. You know, this has been brewing for some time. Over many, many months, we've seen pro-Palestinian protests in London where we've seen some of the most atrocious anti-Semitic hate speech towards our Jewish community. Nothing seems to have been done any proactively against those matters. It all went on for far too long. And now we're seeing it all come to a head. And what we're lacking here is great leadership from the government, who equally are involved in some of this abhorrent language that they come out with. We need leadership, we need stability, we need calm, and we need to support our brave police officers who are dealing with a very volatile situation.
And Oliver, you mentioned support for police officers. Of course, Birmingham wasn't the only place that experienced riots yesterday. A police officer in Plymouth, Inspector Ryan Northmore, said on the record yesterday it was off the scale what they were faced with last night, and they really struggled to police it with the resources available to them. So what more should the government, the Home Office, be doing to support the police officers at a time like this, which is clearly now becoming a bit of a national crisis?
Cameron, we haven't seen scenes like this since 2011, and obviously they were scenes of horror back then. You know, what policing needs to do is it needs to mobilise very, very quickly. Now, one thing British policing has been very good over many, many years, almost a global leader, is in public order policing. I think we're getting to a point now where we need to review our tactics. We need to review the speed at which we deploy mutual aid across this country. You know, bring the officers down from, say, Police Scotland or across from Wales to support. We know these things are going to happen. The problem is when they're spontaneous, they are very hard to respond to, and equally in numbers. And we have seen police officers been incredibly vulnerable over the last week, you know, at holiday inns, trying to protect asylum seekers and refugees in some of these locations. And policing has failed at times. And I think there will be a significant review as to how we've responded to this and how effective we can be in the future.
Absolutely, and we've heard from Keir Starmer that there's going to be a standing army of specialist police officers, but we also hear all the time about how depleted our police force is. So the question of whether those police officers will have extra powers, whether there will be actually more drafted in, what actually is happening there? Will they be taken off other duties? There's a lot to talk about, Oliver, but we're going to have to leave it there. Sorry, Oliver Lawrence, Managing Director of the Public Safety Foundation, and of course a former police officer as well.
Now, coming up, the lawyer for the family who clashed with police officers at Manchester Airport last month has spoken out at a press conference. We'll have more after this.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, to enrich us on the best cheeses and wine to buy, I'm delighted to be joined by the CEO of Inflorescence, Jacinta Madison Wilson. Jacinta, thank you so much for joining us in the studio.
Thank you so much for having me.
Also, thank you so much for bringing what is
what a Sunday you're having.
of wonderful... What do we have before us?
So, we've got 3 gorgeous wines to try today. We've got an English sparkling, we've got a beautiful rosé and a dessert wine, and, of course, cheese.
Wonderful.
And paired them all beautifully.
Now, English sparkling wine has had a bit of a renaissance.
Oh, it's incredible, isn't it?
To use a French word to describe English sparkling wine. It's having a bit of a moment in the sun.
Absolutely. I just think it's so exciting that this is right on our doorstep, essentially, an hour out of London, and we're around beautiful vineyards.
The chalk sort of sediment is exactly the same as the Champagne region.
Absolutely. Yeah, our soils are really similar. We use the same grape varieties a lot of the time. We make it in exactly the same way as Champagne. Our climate is like Champagne was 40 to 50 years ago. So we're really kind of drinking it blind. You almost wouldn't know that you're not drinking champagne. But it's right here on our doorstep. We can stay local now.
Absolutely marvellous. Well, we've got... what is the best order to start?
OK, well, we're going to start with sparkling, because all things in life should start with sparkling. I got married a month ago, and this was actually the... Thank you so much. This was the wine I chose to have as our first wine that we served the guests. This is from a winery called Bluebell, which is in Sussex, and I've chosen to pair this with a lovely... kind of the English version of Camembert, which is called Tunworth. It's a very classic pairing of champagne and brie. So we're kind of going to do the English version of that now.
Classic.
Absolutely. Are you ready to get stuck in?
I am so...
OK.
Hang on. Is it cheese first or wine first?
I'd have a little sip of the wine first.
Sip of the wine, bite
have
of the
a little
cheese.
bite of the cheese and then some more wine. Get it all mixed up in there.
It's like a cheese sandwich.
Exactly. Yes.
OK, here we go. Cheers.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back. It's 12:27. Now, the family and lawyer of Fahir Ahmad and Mohammed Ahmad claims there was a deliberate campaign to smear them after a police officer appeared to kick and stamp on Fahir at Manchester Airport last month.
Yes, the brothers, along with their lawyer and mother, expressed their devastation and trauma over the incident. They also revealed that some family members are police officers themselves with Greater Manchester Police.
Well, our reporter Jack Carson was at the press conference and joined us now. Jack, what more did the family say and his lawyer say at the press conference?
Well, quite extraordinary press conference, really, particularly in terms of the details that the family's lawyer shared around the context, of course, around those viral videos that, you know, that were all over, of course, the internet, showing, of course, an officer kicking one of these men allegedly in the head, and, of course, the injuries that we'd heard about, of course, on that, and also the injuries of the police officers as well that Greater Manchester Police had confirmed around these altercations at Manchester Airport. Now, the context that the family's lawyer provided today said that the incident started when actually the mother, of course, involved in this, Mrs. Akhtar, was on a flight from Pakistan, and for the duration of the flight, the family's lawyers allege that she received a tirade of racist and Islamophobic abuse, so much so that she attempted to make efforts with cabin crew on that flight to try and calm down the situation, had tried to move seats and had had to move back. And it's then when she came off that flight, made her way to arrivals where she met her two sons and grandson, and they were leaving the airport, that the family say the mother froze when they saw the gentleman involved in that incident on the flight at a Starbucks. They say that an altercation then took place because that man had laughed in their face, and it was when they were then going to pay for parking that Fahir, who's the 19-year-old son involved in this incident, they say an officer allegedly grabbed them by the wrist, grabbed them by the neck, pushed them against the ticket machine, and that is when the altercation and the incident, of course, which had gone viral, then proceeded to escalate. Of course, we've seen, you know, the video where Fahir is on the floor, his mother, of course, screaming behind, you know, sat down next to him. Now, it's said that the screaming was because Fahir had been tasered, and his mother was fearing for his life. The family lawyers say today Fahir was limp on the floor, and his mother was fearing for his life, which is why, of course, things then started to escalate more. She said in Urdu, family lawyers said that they have killed my son after he was tasered. The family lawyer tried to reaffirm today that they say the brothers were both compliant before the officer allegedly stamped on his head, and of course the mother then claims that she was struck by the taser gun herself, and the family shocked by the violence. We heard other claims as well that Fahir, who had been arrested and handcuffed, that at the point where he was being taken away, there was questions about why the officer's body cam was not on. That's been one of the things that was mentioned in the press conference quite a few times, questions as to why the body cam footage was turned off. Of course, it was initially introduced to be able to protect officers, to protect members of the public involving incidents. So questions from the family's lawyer today about why that body cam footage was turned off. But they allege that the officer took Fahir round a corner out of sight of CCTV cameras, and then continued to call him slurs and swear at him due around the fact that his body camera footage wasn't on. I mean, the press conference was shown images as well of the injuries sustained to the family, particularly the mother, Mrs. Akhtar. She didn't realise at the time, but when she stood up, dazed by allegedly being hit in the face, that she was bleeding from under her right eye. The situation, of course, escalating and being told, of course, around the trauma that particularly the grandson has suffered in this, watching, of course, his father and his grandmother be involved in this incident. And, of course, questions as well from the family's lawyers in this press conference towards Andy Burnham, saying how he received, of course, that footage before the family had been able to see that CCTV footage. They said that this CCTV footage had been pushed in different narratives and didn't show the full story. It's one of the reasons why they wanted to hold this press conference today, in order to be able to provide the full context. Of course, this whole incident has been referred to the IOPC, and of course Greater Manchester Police say they have suspended one of the police officers involved in that incident pending investigation.
Jack, just very quickly, it does appear to be quite odd, doesn't it, holding this press conference? Wouldn't this sort of information, these types of descriptions and allegations be spared for some kind of court procedure?
Well, this is essentially one of the things that was mentioned quite a few times, that yes, there's been quite a few allegations that have been put, of course, to Greater Manchester Police, to Andy Burnham particularly today, but then also the mention when the media tried to question, of course, the family's lawyers, that due process was taking place, questions of whether this was in the right light to share this kind of information when due process is, of course, taking place. The IOPC are investigating. The family lawyer wished to meet with the regional head of the IOPC here, of course, in the northwest, and those proceedings do continue.
OK, Jack Carson, thank you very much for that. Next, we're going to be diving into big fines for those water companies and the sewage overflows. But first is the news with Sam Francis.
Very good afternoon to you, just after 12:30, and the top story this lunchtime. Dozens of people are appearing in courts across the country today, charged over rioting, as extra prosecutors are now being drafted in. It comes after violent protests continued overnight, with bricks and fireworks being thrown at officers in Plymouth, in Devon, and petrol bombs thrown in Belfast. A former head of the UK's counter-terror police has said it's time to start treating the worst of the riots as terrorism. Well, a week on since 3 children were stabbed to death in Southport, the government's now investigating whether state actors are spreading disinformation and fuelling the violence. Eluned Morgan has told the Senedd it's the honour of her life to be nominated as the first woman to serve as First Minister of Wales. In her first speech earlier, she paid tribute to her predecessors, including Vaughan Gething, and she also shared her hope to add a vibrant splash of colour to her role, declaring the grey suits are out. Baroness Morgan received 28 votes, defeating the Conservative and Plaid Cymru nominees. 3 water companies are facing a combined record fine of £168 million after a series of failings, including sewage spills. Thames Water, Northumbrian and Yorkshire Water were issued that penalty by the regulator Ofwat. Justice Secretary Shabana Mahmood says the prison system is in crisis after a new report revealed shocking levels of chaos at Wandsworth Prison. The findings highlight concerns including safety, staffing and overcrowding. The government's confirmed a £100 million funding package over the next 5 years and promised additional staffing. Minimum service levels brought in by the Conservative government to keep some sectors running after more than a year of disruptive industrial action has now been overturned by Labour. The new Labour government says they will remove the law as part of an employment rights bill to reset industrial relations. And stock markets around the world are starting to bounce back after falling sharply over fears the US economy is heading for recession. London's FTSE 100 suffered its biggest fall yesterday since July of last year. And Team GB's gold medal haul now stands at 12, going into day 11 of the Paris Games. Emma Finucane, Sophie Capewell and Katie Marchant took the total to 11 as they set a world record in track cycling's women's team sprint yesterday. Then over at the athletics last night, Keely Hodgkinson claimed a first global title with victory in the 800 metres. Those are your latest headlines for now. I'm Sam Francis, back with you at 1 o'clock.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello, here's your latest GB News weather forecast coming to you from the Met Office. Many of us will see some sunny spells through today, but there will also be plenty of showers, especially towards the northwest, and we have had some persistent rain pushing its way through. That's due to a front that is now starting to clear its way towards the east, but it is lingering across parts of East Anglia, Kent, bringing a bit more cloud here, and also some outbreaks of rain as we go through the afternoon. Elsewhere though, some sunny spells for most places, also quite a few showers, especially across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Here, some of them could be on the heavy side. We have got some fresher air coming in behind this front, and so that means temperatures are a bit lower than of late, still just about getting into the mid-20s, perhaps towards the south. Now, as we go into this evening, there will be plenty more showers, particularly across all western parts of Scotland. Still some heavy downpours quite likely. A slightly drier theme for eastern parts of Scotland, but even here, a few showers pushing through. Plenty of showers also for Northern Ireland and some pushing into western parts of northern England. The northeast likely to stay largely dry. Down the eastern side of England, also a generally fine end to the day, but a few showers pushing in across parts of Wales and southwest England as we go through the evening. Some of these showers will continue overnight, but all the time central eastern parts of England look like they'll stay dry with some clear skies. But across Scotland and Northern Ireland, showers continuing for a time, and then some heavier persistent rain pushing into western parts of Scotland as we head towards dawn tomorrow. Temperatures will be a touch lower than some recent nights, particularly towards the south, getting into low teens for some of us. As we go through tomorrow then, a showery wet picture across parts of Scotland, some persistent rain for a time through the morning, but a lot of that will clear northwards as we go towards the afternoon, and elsewhere plenty of showers around and a bit of a cool breezy feel to things, and so temperatures, although similar to today, it may feel a little bit cooler, especially with a bit more cloud around. Bye-bye.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Jules Buckley. There's a couple of collisions in North Yorkshire to let you know about. Firstly, in Giggleswick, the A65 shut just by Craven Bank Lane for investigation work causing queues. And in Huntingdon, the Moulton Road is closed by Hopgrove Lane South in delays. That's due to a bump as well. A5 in Northamptonshire between Dodford and Norton's blocked and queuing at the scene of a collision. There's a broken down lorry and fuel spillage causing tailbacks on the clockwise M25. A two-lane shut just after the Holmesdale Tunnel takes about half an hour at the moment to get past the scene. Wimborne in Dorset slow too, eastbound A31 queuing away from the Merley roundabout to the Camphor Bottom roundabout. That follows an earlier collision. All lanes are open. Devon southbound M528 at Columpton to 29 Exeter, lane shut. A vehicle there having a tyre change. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It is now 12:40 in the afternoon. Now, 3 water companies are facing a combined record fine of £168 million. That's after a series of failings, including sewage spills.
Yeah, Thames Water, Northumbrian and Yorkshire Water were issued the penalty by the regulator Ofwat, with Thames facing the biggest fine of £104 million.
Well, Steve Reid, the Environment Secretary, said he welcomes the action from Ofwat to impose these fines on the 3 water companies. But what does it mean and what impact will it have?
Yeah, well, we're joined now by Amy Fairman, the head of the campaigns for River Action UK. Amy, thank you for joining us. Analysis of DEFRA data suggests that sewage dumped into rivers and lakes and beaches designated safe to bathe in happened an average of 86 times a day last year. That is pretty extraordinary.
Yeah, and you know, these are areas where people, the most popular areas for swimming, for playing with our kids, for rowing, for paddling. You know, it's devastating, isn't it? And you know, last year alone, 600,000 times sewage was discharged into waterways across the UK. That's 1,600 times a day across all of our waterways. I mean, it's just shocking, isn't it? I mean, it's about time that action is taken.
And these fines, what do you expect the impact of them to be? OK, so £104 million Thames Water has to pay, Yorkshire £47 million, Northumbrian Water £17 million. Is that enough for them to completely change the way they do things, for them to stop these sewage spills? Well, look, you know, we've seen years and years of sort of toothless enforcement by the regulators, and now we're starting to see them finally wake up to the public outcry of what's happening to our rivers and our waterways, the poisoning of our rivers. You know, and I think we hope as a campaigning organisation that these fines are starting to become meaningful deterrents, but we need to see root and branch reform of the whole industry if we're ever going to see, you know, an end to the profiteering from pollution. This is a step in the right direction. We need to see Ofwat and other regulators really step up and hold the industry to account. That includes meaningful fines, as we're seeing today. It means enforcement agencies that are given the powers and the funding to enforce the regulation that will actually deter polluters.
Amy, what do water companies actually need to do to solve this problem? Is it the fact that their sewage treatment works aren't being properly maintained, or is it something else?
Look, we've seen decades of the hollowing out of our water sector, you know, profiteering from pollution, huge dividends paid out to shareholders. You know, for example, £1.4 billion paid to the industry in shareholder dividends last year. You know, last year's fines alone, if you equate that, if you look at the fines that were levied on the water industry last year, that's 1p in every pound of dividends that was paid out. That is not an incentive to stop.
But Amy,
polluting.
you'll know as well as we do that, you know, infrastructure in this country costs a huge amount. And if there's going to be a huge amount of investment in the infrastructure needed to keep our water clean, it's going to cost us. So we're heading for higher bills, aren't we? And these fines are only going to make that worse.
Well, these fines can't be levied on people's bills. They have to come out of the industry's pockets. They can't increase bills.
They could be passed on in future years.
Well, they can't do that. Ofwat will be very, you know, that is Ofwat's job. They cannot be, you know, Ofwat have very tight. You know, they are supposed to control what the companies do, and they are not allowed to pass these fines on to other customers. This has to be financed internally. So, you know, we hope this has got to go to consultation. We hope that Ofwat hold fast and actually, you know, apply teeth to their regulatory power and keep on, you know, levying these fines that actually deter the water industry from polluting. And to your point, Emily, you know, infrastructure, there needs to be investment in infrastructure. But like I said, we need to have root and branch reform of the industry that stop the profiteering of pollution. You know, these huge dividends paid out, these huge CEO bonuses, we need to stop that happening and seeing the investment back into the industry rather than...
I just worry, Amy, that every time we try and build a new reservoir, you know, there's so many obstacles that these things get delayed by years and years and years and years. When you try to improve any part of our infrastructure, it takes so long. I just worry about how this is all going to happen quick enough. And, you know, fining these businesses is all well and good for their part in all of this. But if we don't have the infrastructure needed, then, you know, that's another problem.
Well, exactly, and we do need really quick investment in the infrastructure, and but let's not forget that a lot of these spills are illegal. They're not allowed to, you know, they're actually, you know, going a lot outside of regulation. You know, putting sewage into waterways when we don't have heavy rainfall. You know, we've seen this ruling, or the findings of Ofwat show that 67% of Thames Water's treatment plants have capacity and operational issues. So we need to see, you know, a really big U-turn in kind of how the industry is functioning, how it's structured. and we need to see investment fast, and we need to see the stopping of profiteering. A lot of shareholder funds are going out of the country to Hong Kong, New York, etc. to big investors, and there hasn't been 1 year in which shareholders haven't taken out more than they've invested.
OK, well, thank you very much indeed. Amy Fairman, Head of Campaigns from River Action UK. Great to get your point of view.
Thanks, Amy. Coming up, the silver girl turns golden as Keely Hodgkinson wins the 800-metre in Paris. More on that shortly.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Karen Stevenson was born in Stoke-on-Trent and read music at Trinity College, Cambridge. She's played cello with many of the world's great orchestras under the batons of some of the most renowned conductors, and she joins me now to discuss her career and the importance of music in education. Tell me about that. What is your role at the Philharmonia?
My role at the Philharmonia is number 2 cello. I've been there for about 15 years. Sometimes I play number 1 cello as well, which is a great opportunity for me.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I often think what a very difficult life it is to be a professional musician.
I make a living out of it. It is definitely possible. Yeah, we don't really like it when we get into a taxi and someone says, "What's your day job?" Because we work really hard.
I was kind of making the opposite point. Not that you'd also have a day job. I think the perfection that is required for a professional musician is extraordinary. On the whole, we are intolerant of mistakes in classical music.
Yes, we are.
And I just wondered whether you don't become very frustrated with a world in which everything else is imperfect.
You are only as good as your last concert, Michael. That's how it feels. It is a lot of pressure. Sometimes we will say, OK, a pint for every wrong note or something, but depending on the piece of music, that could be quite dangerous.
How many hours a day do you have to practice?
You have to practice much more when you're younger, I think, when you're learning. I think this is really important. And when you're at music college. I'm a busy, I'm travelling, I have a family. I can't practice as much as I used to, so you have to rely on your experience. What I really wanted to say is that there's been a lot of fear-mongering about classical music being in decline and it not being relevant, and I really wanted to say that I don't think that's the case. Our audiences have increased. They're the highest they've been in 10 years.
The People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes,
she could have said stump. You made my argument for me. My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere. Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different. Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, it's 12:49. You're watching and listening to Good Afternoon Britain. Now, we were just discussing these big fines that have been issued on these water companies. Huge fines, tens of millions, one over 100 million. And it is a question of where this money is going to come from and if it will push up our bills. And, of course, if you're going to, if you're a shareholder, if you invest in a company and then you don't receive dividends out of it, you're hardly going to continue investing, are you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Tricky.
And these bonuses from the executives of the company, for example, the chief exec of Thames Water receiving a £446,000 bonus last year. It's not really going to scratch the surface of a £104 million fine, is it?
No, but it is a huge bonus. Wow.
It is.
446,000.
The dream.
Let us know your thoughts. Do you think it's a good thing that we're cracking down with these fines on these water companies that are spilling sewage, or is it a little bit more complicated? But let's finish with some good news, because it was another great evening, fantastic evening for Team GB in the Paris Olympics. Gold medals from the women's team sprint and, of course, Keely Hodgkinson dominating in the 800 metres. commentators.
Yeah, let's get the latest with sports broadcaster Chris Scudder. Chris, welcome to the programme. Team GB now 5th in the overall medals table, so good achievement?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, they've got 12 goals now. I think, ideally they'd love to finish third because we know who's going to finish the top two. That's going to be China and the USA. But just behind, the Brits traditionally there. France, the last time they finished in the top 5 medals was 1948, and the hosts always throw the kitchen sink at their home Olympics. That's why they're so high. But I think Britain are going to go beyond them and probably finish third. I say that because there's a lot of cycling gold, I think, to come. You mentioned the women's team sprint last night. Men's team sprint going later. There could be a real handful of gold medals to come in the cycling, plus, of course, the track and field. So there's the women's team sprint from last night. And so Britain are so much further ahead than anybody else in the cycling that medal table is going to look a lot better, I think, in the coming days.
Fantastic news. We're looking forward to it. But why are we so good at cycling then, Chris?
It's just the program. I mean, some countries are always good at certain sports. You look at why are Jamaica so good at sprinting? It's just the program. They've had it over years. Why are Korea so good at archery? They always win everything. It's just that the program and the heritage as well. And if you keep winning, you keep getting the funding. That's basically it. When you stop winning medals, you lose the funding, and then it gets harder. So success breeds success. That's why they're so good.
And Chris, there's a bit of controversy around the boxing semi-final this evening, isn't there? Explain a little bit about that.
Yeah, Iman Khalifa, who's not been out of the news. Interesting, yesterday there was a media conference by the International Boxing Association, the organisation who say she failed a gender test last year. It descended into chaos, really, and a lot of shouting, a lot going on. It hasn't taken us any further forward, really. And we're at the situation where she's already won a medal. If she wins tonight in her medal match, she will be in for a chance of gold or silver. So if she loses tonight, she'll get a bronze anyway. But you've got a massive split of opinion here. Some people saying it's not fair that she has the XY chromosome, which is based on that unverified test that the IBA insist was done correctly, but the IOC don't recognise the IBA. Big political row. So if she gets a medal, she will be keeping it unless there's a massive appeal and a massive legal case.
I was going to say, is there a bit of a problem here where there seems to be different rules for different bodies? The IBA saying one thing and accepting one version, and the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, being perhaps a bit more lenient?
Yeah, well, the IOC are running, because they've fallen out. It's been for 5 years now. They have not recognised the International Boxing Association, and therefore they are running the boxing tournament themselves. So their rules go. Other sports, the IOC always sort of handed over to individual associations, but boxing is different. And in fact, we've almost got to a stage where boxing was in doubt for these Olympics and for the LA Games in 2028. That's not going to happen, I don't think. But there's a massive legal case to come, and the boxers are the pawns in the middle of this, really. But I think most people would say, if these are male boxers, there's no proof yet, then they shouldn't be there. It's a huge row, and it's not
the
going
Olympics
away.
is never without its controversies. Thank you very much indeed, as always, Chris Scudder. Now, coming up, we're going to be back on the ground in Birmingham following those shocking scenes last night. Riots entering their 7th day. Don't go anywhere.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, here's your latest GB News weather forecast coming to you from the Met Office. Many of us will see some sunny spells through today, but there will also be plenty of showers, especially towards the northwest, and we have had some persistent rain pushing its way through. That's due to a front that is now starting to clear its way towards the east, but it is lingering across parts of East Anglia, Kent, bringing a bit more cloud here and also some outbreaks of rain as we go through the afternoon. Elsewhere, though, some sunny spells for most places, also quite a few showers, especially across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Here, some of them could be on the heavy side. We have got some fresher air coming in behind this front, and so that means temperatures are a bit lower than of late, still just about getting into the mid-20s, perhaps towards the south. Now, as we go into this evening, there will be plenty more showers, particularly across all western parts of Scotland. Still some heavy downpours quite likely. A slightly drier theme for eastern parts of Scotland, but even here, a few showers pushing through. Plenty of showers also for northern Northern Ireland and some pushing into western parts of northern England. The northeast likely to stay largely dry. Down the eastern side of England, also a generally fine end to the day, but a few showers pushing in across parts of Wales and southwest England as we go through the evening. Some of these showers will continue overnight, but all the time central eastern parts of England look like they'll stay dry with some clear skies. But across Scotland and Northern Ireland, showers continuing for a time, and then some heavier persistent rain pushing into western parts of Scotland as we head towards dawn tomorrow. Temperatures will be a touch lower than some recent nights, particularly towards the south, getting into low teens for some of us. As we go through tomorrow then, a showery wet picture across parts of Scotland, some persistent rain for a time through the morning, but a lot of that will clear northwards as we go towards the afternoon, and elsewhere plenty of showers around and a bit of a cool breezy feel to things, and so temperatures, although similar to today, it may feel a little bit cooler, especially with a bit more cloud around. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We could be calling you with the news that you've won our latest Great British giveaway, an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash. David from Kent was our last big winner. Listen to what he had to say about getting that winning call.
Hi, I'm David from Kent and I won £15,000 and it couldn't have come at a better time. I was gobsmacked. What have you got to lose for what it costs? In fact, I've done it again this week, so I'd recommend it to anybody.
For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2 or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Prince Harry also revealed that he wouldn't bring his wife Meghan Markle back to the UK over safety concerns.
Let's talk to royal correspondent Michael Cole.
Good morning, Stephen. Good morning, Ellie. I mean, they live in California. I'm not sure what the murder rate is there, but that's a more dangerous place than Britain's at any time of the day. And of course, he compromised his own safety when he said in his book, Spare, his autobiography, which was Ghost Britain, that he'd personally killed 25 Taliban when he was serving with the British Army in Afghanistan. Well, that painted a target for life on the back of himself and his family, which was a very unwise thing for him to do. The other thing which struck me, it was that he invoked the name of the late Queen, saying that he'd had several conversations with his grandmother, and she'd been very, very supportive in his battle. He sees himself, and it's the word he's used, as a dragon slayer against the popular press, the tabloid press, and he's continuing with that. Of course, his brother, Prince William, has settled, but also in the programme was Hugh Grant. Now, Hugh Grant also has settled, as indeed did I, when I received an apology from News Group. I believe in a free and unfettered press. Newspapers are having a bad time at the moment, losing circulation, losing advertising. Young people don't read newspapers. And so I felt that the right thing to do was to settle. I didn't want to take punitive action against newspapers.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 1 o'clock on Tuesday, the 6th of August. I'm Cameron Walker.
And I'm Emily Carver.
Britain in chaos. More than 400 people have now been arrested in the wake of disorder around the country, according to police sources, with the number expected to continue to rise in the coming days. It's understood there were 46 charges on Monday and 18 overnight.
And war of words. Number 10 has condemned comments made by billionaire Elon Musk, who claimed civil war is inevitable in the UK, as well as slamming suggestions that there is a two-tier policing system.
And the lawyer for the family who clashed with police officers at Manchester Airport last month has spoken out at a televised press conference with fresh allegations. We'll have the very latest.
And good news, the silver girl turns golden. Keely Hodgkinson emerged victorious at the Olympics 800 metres final in Paris last night, cruising across the finish line in under 2 minutes. And please do get in touch throughout the show, gbnews.com/your say. We are going to get to some of your views. Lots of you getting in touch with what we've seen in a 7th day of unrest across this country. Yesterday, very much Plymouth and also Birmingham hotspots for violence and intimidatory behaviour. We have been live in Birmingham because last night there was what appeared to be a gathering. Well, there was a massive gathering of mostly Asian men who said that they were there to sort of protect their community. There was quite a lot going around about how the far right might be there. Anyway, it descended into quite a lot of violent behaviour.
It certainly did. It did. The local MP, Jess Phillips, accused of making excuses for that gang, although she did tweet later on in the evening saying anybody who's taken part in the violence should be held accountable.
I'm glad you brought that up because I think... Why did Jess Phillips, now she is now a Home Office minister, so she has real power in this country. Why would she even want to be perceived as sort of special treatment to one community over another?
Well, I think everybody online needs to be incredibly careful about what they are writing, because what you don't want to be doing is accused of fanning the flames of all this division, because clearly it's a very heated issue at the moment. 7 nights, 7 days even, of riots and disorder across the UK, and it's the government's job and the police's job really to try and clamp down on this and bring communities together. And it appears it's up to the faith leaders, which we've written in the Times this morning, of all faiths, Christian, Muslim, Islam, and others as well, calling for calm and calling for unity.
Yeah, will that unity come, though? I mean, Jess Phillips, 11:30 last night, tweeting, "I've spoken to police and pub staff at sites of violence tonight. Pub has been visited by lots of lovely communities sending solidarity and are locking up for the night now as usual." That doesn't really chime with what Charlie Peters, our reporter, was saying there, that essentially the people within the pub were barricading themselves out of fear.
Yeah, and of course it wasn't just Birmingham. Police officers injured in Plymouth overnight as well. More disorder across the country. And we've seen now a number of arrests, but now it's the criminal justice system that's having to deal with all these arrests and charges. Are they going to be sitting overnight, as the Justice Minister suggested this morning, court sitting overnights to deal with this number of cases, and then once they've been, convicted, where are you going to put them? Are there enough prison spaces?
Lots of questions there for you. Please do get in touch. Try and make sense of it all for us. gbnews.com/your say is the way to get in touch, but it's the headlines with Sam.
Cameron, Emily, thank you very much and good afternoon to you. It's just after 1 o'clock and the top story this lunchtime. The government suggesting courts could begin sitting through the night as more than 100 arrests have now been made since disorder broke out a week ago. That was in response to the stabbings in Southport. It's understood more than 500 additional prison places are also being prepared as thousands of specialist police officers are set to hit the streets to deal with ongoing riots. Overnight, fireworks, stones, glass bottles and bricks were thrown in Plymouth in Devon in another night of unrest and disorder. 6 people there were arrested and at least 3 officers injured. Disorder also broke out in Belfast, with footage online appearing to show petrol bombs and missiles being thrown at police. A solicitor of a man who was kicked in the head by a police officer at Manchester Airport says the family's a victim of a smear campaign. Amma Anwar says Fahir Amaz's mother was racially abused on a plane before the events of last month. He's also accused officers of not having body cams turned on during the incident.
Ahmad and his mother Shamim were shocked at the unnecessary aggression and violence, alleged violence, shown from the start. There was no immediate attempt to speak to Fahir, to ask him to step aside, to caution him, or to simply say, "Can we speak to you for a second?"
And turning to Wales, Eluned Morgan has been selected as First Minister, the first woman to take on the role. She was confirmed in a vote of the Senedd members earlier after the Welsh Parliament was recalled from summer recess. The leader of the Welsh Labour Party marked the occasion in her speech earlier, declaring the grey suits are out, and said that she hopes to add a vibrant splash of colour to the role. Shocking levels of chaos at Wandsworth Prison are taking place in plain view of leaders. That's according to a new report from the prison's watchdog. The prison's inspector found the jail in London's not safe, with rampant violence, drug use and overcrowding. Despite nearly £900,000 being invested since the alleged escape of Daniel Khalif, staff still failed to account for prisoners during the day. The Ministry of Justice is promising £100 million for improvements, though critics are calling for an urgent change in leadership. 3 water companies are facing a combined record fine of £168 million. That's after a series of failings were found, including sewage spills. Thames Water, Northumbrian Water and Yorkshire Water were issued that penalty by the regulator Ofwat, with Thames Water facing the biggest fine of the 3 firms. That's £104 million. Concerns over rising university costs are causing young people in the UK to skip higher education. That's according to new figures from UCAS. The admissions service is reporting a significant drop in school leavers applying for uni this year. In Scotland, 145,000 students are receiving their exam results today. But we heard this morning that 7,000 people were met with blank emails because of a distribution fault, something the Scottish Conservatives have blamed the SNP for, saying it's a chaotic and shambolic situation. And the national waiting list for children's gender care in England and Wales has risen despite the opening of 2 new specialist centres. Figures at the end of May show that there were more than 5,700 young people on that list. On average, children are having to wait 100 weeks for their first appointment. NHS England, though, says it will set out further plans to transform the provision of care. Several US personnel have been injured in a suspected rocket attack at a military base in Iraq. US defence officials say troops at the Al-Assad airbase are still assessing the injuries and the damage. It comes, of course, as tensions are rising in the Middle East after leaders of the Lebanese militant group Hezbollah and Hamas were assassinated last week. In the US, a judge has ruled that Google acted illegally to maintain a monopoly on online searches. They said the tech giant paid tens of millions of dollars each year to ensure its search engine was the default on smartphones and browsers. Its parent company, though, Alphabet, says it will be appealing that decision. Update on the markets, and stocks around the world are now starting to bounce back after falling sharply yesterday over fears the US economy is heading for a recession. London's FTSE 100 suffered its biggest fall since July last year, and in Asia, shares closed with a big drop, the biggest fall since 1987's Black Monday. And a final roundup on the Olympics this hour. Great Britain's equestrian team have finished the Paris Games with 5 medals, including 2 golds. But sadly, they weren't able to add any more to this morning's individual show jumping. Meanwhile, Keely Hodgkinson's become just the 10th British woman to win athletics gold, as she stormed across the line last night in the 800 metres. And Team GB's also set a new world record in the women's team sprint track cycling, bringing the total medals haul to 12 golds so far, putting us in 5th place. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sam Francis. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome back. It's now 1:09 and more than 400 people have now been arrested in the wake of the disorder around the country, with the number expected to continue to rise in the coming days.
Yeah, and it's understood that there were 46 charges yesterday and 18 overnight.
Yes, we're also hearing that police are aware of 6 potential events today on Tuesday, and officers are anticipating again a busy day tomorrow on Wednesday as they monitor reports of at least 30 possible gatherings. It doesn't appear appear as if this is letting up.
No, it certainly doesn't. Well, we're now joined by GB News' political editor, Chris Hope, live from Westminster. Chris, welcome. Tory leadership favourite Robert Jenrick has spoken out about this, saying that police must crack down on all groups engaged in this violence, regardless of what side they're on.
That's right. Hi, Cameron. Hi, Emily. Yeah, Robert Jenrick, he's a favourite to replace Rishi Sunak as the Tory leader. He's done quite a strong intervention this lunchtime in which he talks about the need for a lack of squeamishness in calling out groups from across the racial divide, white people, those from Asian background, saying all violence must be condemned. I think we've got a clip here of what I have to say.
The far right, who attacked a mosque, are a disgrace. The thugs attacking police officers are a disgrace. The arsonists, who set fire to a hotel with people inside, are a disgrace. The racists attacking black or Asian Britons are a disgrace. And the sectarian gangs, marching through towns and cities waving weapons, and in some cases attacking white Britons, are a disgrace. None of this is who we are. We must show no squeamishness or selectivity. All this violence must be called out. There's no room for moral confusion or weakness in this moment. From this point forward, anyone who carries a weapon on the street, attacks the police, or launches racist ambushes on people from other communities must be sent to prison for the longest possible term.
Robert Jenrick there, the former immigration minister who resigned from the Home Office over the last Tory government's approach to sending asylum seekers to Rwanda. Now, his team have made very clear he's having a go there, not at the police, but at the political response. He's seen overnight the Home Office minister, Jess Phillips, there talk about a far-right group and almost trying to apparently say that the gathering of pro-Palestinian people in Birmingham was whipped up by the far right online. He's trying to draw attention to the Labour response to this and say it's important to call out all violence by all groups, not just to focus on the far right, and that's why he's made that intervention this lunchtime.
Yes, very interesting indeed. Clearly setting himself apart from Keir Starmer's response, which has exclusively focused on the far-right thuggery, as he calls it. Christopher Hope, thank you very much. Live from Westminster. Please keep us up to date on all things political. But we're joined now by our national reporter, Charlie Peters, who is on the ground in Birmingham. Charlie, because in Birmingham last night, there were some shocking scenes.
Shocking scenes indeed, Emily, because this pub here was descended on by a masked mob. Many of the people attacking this location were armed. We saw machetes and knives being brandished by the mob that came down here, of predominantly South Asians who moved from a location about half a mile away, marching onto this pub, where a karaoke night was being hosted last night here at the Clumsy Swan pub in Yardley, where people had to barricade themselves in here as the mob descended. We saw the assistant manager had her hand injured due to the attempt to block up the door with some furniture. And I just want to take you round briefly, if I can, into the wider space here, because that mob didn't just appear out of nowhere. They'd marched from a prior demonstration in Bawdsley Green, about half a mile away. In that place, they'd gathered in large numbers. Hundreds were there, and they marched up the road just behind me now. You can see in that distance there for a long period of time. They were walking through the street in some clips that I've seen by locals today, and in none of the footage were the police there. The police did not attend the scene last night until far too late. One clip I've also seen shows a police officer saying that that event was no different to what they might see in the scuffles on a Saturday night in town. Well, if that's normal for Birmingham, I think that's shocking for a lot of people who live here. They don't often see those kind of scenes. Well, in reaction to the concerns raised about policing here last night, the police not monitoring that masked gang with weapons who had intimidated journalists on the ground in Bawdsley Green, I spoke to a local here about those views and about their concerns about the police.
no police presence at all. Not until after everyone phoned from the pub to say like there was trouble going on, and there was machetes, knives, a lot of violence, a lot of antisocial behaviour. Then there was no police around, not whatsoever. Even from the march on Boards Green Road, there was no police.
Right, so they could have actually been seen marching towards the pub from another demonstration where weapons were visible in the hours leading up to the violence that happened here last night. So they should have caught up to it, in your view?
Yeah, definitely, 100%. They should have started with the protest from the beginning, and it was outside a hospital where surgeons and everyone have had to go home and cancel operations because the cars were getting smashed up. There was no police presence there, so where was the police? They failed in every way possible yesterday.
We've seen them turn up here today, very briefly. Is it too little too late, in your view?
Definitely, 100%. Apparently it's been saying that it was meant to be a huge police presence today. Can you see any police? There's no police around anywhere, is there?
Are you nervous that what happened last night might happen here again because of the lax police response?
Well, yeah, definitely, 100%, because I know when no one come, no police came. And I fear, because I live right by where the protest started, and there was no police around, then I've got children. I had a lot more children in the house last night, so it's very unnerving. And it feels like there's tension in the air today everywhere we go.
There's a current discussion at the moment, isn't there, about so-called two-tier policing, that different groups get different levels of policing.
100%.
That happens in Birmingham?
Yes, 100%. 100%. It goes, I don't even know how to explain it. There's one rule for another and one rule for someone else.
You think it happened here last night?
Yeah, definitely, 100%. 100% happened. And the police failed us.
One rule for one and one rule for another. Very strong views here about concerns about so-called two-tier policing that we've heard regularly throughout these demonstrations in the last week. From all the eyewitnesses I've spoken to today, it's clear that the police were not sufficiently tracking that protest last night, as people, many of them wearing masks and balaclavas, brandishing machetes and knives, slashing tyres of journalists, were able to march up a street and descend on this pub and cause extensive criminal damage. We've seen a smashed window over there, but also a man being beaten up outside the pub. The police turned up eventually to deal with that. They've not confirmed to us today if any arrests were made by West Midlands Police. Lots of locals here concerned that that might happen again.
On this particular incident, they weren't there according to the footage and from those you've been speaking to at the time of the incident. Local MP Jess Phillips saying that police have now attended all sites of violence last night. But just thinking about the community today, how they're reacting to this incident, how they're dealing with it, are you getting the sense that they have any faith in West Midlands Police at this moment in time?
It's very hard to say, but the majority perspective I've heard so far today, it's been dozens of people gathering at this pub, is that it has shaken them in some way, because the extent to which people were able to brandish weapons and march in public and show off those weapons and cause such an intimidating attack here on a man stood outside this pub, and the police response was, in their view, so delayed, that's going to cause a lot of fear. That's not going to inspire confidence. That's the view I've heard today. But equally, we've also seen some South Asians coming here trying to reassure that that is not the majority perspective from their background, from their community. We've also heard reports from the manager at the local pub here that a local mosque is going to pay for the damage that was suffered as an account of that mob trying to break in, trying to reach the families inside. As I said, it was a karaoke night. There were children, grandchildren even, young children inside that pub as it was attacked by that mob. Some of the live streams that I saw last night as well, backed up by several streams at one time, saying that they were moving on this location because they wanted to intimidate and dominate and set themselves as a major force here. Now, it was said originally, rumours were spreading that they were responding to another demonstration at 5 p.m. at Bawdsley Green, but that demonstration never happened, and so they marched on and came to this location instead. Many of the people on that march saying they wanted to tackle the EDL, according again to some of those live streams I saw. There was no EDL here last night. That's unclear if the group even still exists. But what is clear is that people who were here were attending a pub peacefully, enjoying some karaoke, trying to drink with their families, and instead got caught up in a terrifying affair of having a mob brandishing weapons, trying to break through the front door and smashing a window.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Charlie Peters, live on the scene in Birmingham of those violent attacks on that pub yesterday evening. I mean, it's pretty distressing, isn't it? We've got what happened in Birmingham, we've got huge riots, protests down in Plymouth. It seems as though I don't know how many towns and cities have now been impacted by far-right protesters. We've seen looting, we've seen arson attacks, we've seen attacks on police officers, we've seen even an injured police dog, which they're looking for someone who is accused of throwing a brick at a dog. This is just ramping up.
It's very worrying times. I think it's important to point out that this is just a very small minority of individuals causing this chaos. And as Charlie said in his report there, talking about a local mosque is going to repair the damage to this pub in Birmingham, the Clumsy Swan. So there are pockets of community cohesion trying to rebuild following these devastating scenes and devastating riots. And in the Times this morning, faith leaders, as we've been discussing earlier, writing as one, from whatever faith they are, calling for calm and calling for community cohesion. But, as we've also been reporting, there are a number of planned protests still to come today.
Yeah, and when we talk about police resources, and it appears as though when we speak to our police guests, our policing guests on this channel, so much concern about a lack of resources, not sufficient resources to be at all of these different demonstrations, to police them without fear and favour. It is a huge amount of pressure on our force, and we're going to be speaking to a former detective superintendent in the Met Police very shortly, just after this break, to try and find out how on earth the police go about dealing with all of these potential different demonstrations, which, as we see, turn ugly very quickly. Stick with us.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Now, we've got a story and a half to tell you and bring you now. Our very own GB News political correspondent, who we love very much, Catherine Foster, joins us in the studio, and she's smiling, but she wasn't smiling for the past few days.
Two of her sons, Matthew and Andrew, were reported missing in Bali.
I got a text from a friend saying, can you give us a call, a bit worried about them. Then spoke to a girl they'd befriended who was in Sweden, but they'd met on their travels. And she told me that they'd gone up the mountain. By the time I found out, they'd been missing for 30 hours. They'd gone up the mountain on the Tuesday night, British time. This was the Thursday morning, without a guide. And they'd told her it was really hard. And she told them to turn back, but they hadn't. And they'd sent screenshots from this app with this trail that they were following on the app, screenshots of the app in case there was a problem, and a Snapchat of a Matthew avatar at the top. And she said, I know they made it to the top because I could see that his phone had nearly died. But the trail had actually closed many years ago. So the app, we will need to make sure that that gets taken off the app. But, you know, technology saved them in the end because it was the screenshots and it was the messages that they'd sent, but they should never have been without a guide.
But what were you doing during those 30 hours that Mum couldn't, when the phone died and Mum couldn't get in touch? Where were you? What were you up to?
Well, we were trying to figure out the best course of action, because it started to pour with rain. The amount of rain created a river, like a stream.
Yeah.
We were like, oh,
yeah,
let's follow the stream downhill, and then the sun set, and we just had to like sleep in the bushes in the jungle.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Okoye, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled.
Lovely. Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back. It's 1:25. Let's get back to our top story today, as 400 arrests have now been made so far following those riots over the last week across the country. We've had police officers injured in Plymouth last night, those awful scenes in Birmingham of a pub being attacked as well. But joining us now to discuss all this is former Detective Superintendent in the Metropolitan Police, Shabnam Chowdhury. Shabnam, thank you so much for joining us. There's been a lot of accusations thrown at the police across the country over the last week or so about this so-called two-tier policing, favouring one side over the other. What do you make of those accusations?
Yeah, I disagree. I think what you have to look at is what police are presented with, whether there's a planned protest or whether there's spontaneous incidents. They have to deal with each incident on its merits. And when it comes to these protests or these riots that we've seen in the last week in many incidents, they have to work on the basis of intelligence. So, for example, if there is suggestion that there's going to be a pre-planned protest and there's any significant intelligence, i.e. that there is a serious likelihood of violence taking place, then they can stop those protests. But given that there doesn't seem to be sufficient evidence or intelligence to suggest that, they then have to go along and they have to then police these protests with the resources that they have and with the trained officers that they have with the appropriate skills for public order.
One is suggesting that this is easy for the police. We've seen these outbreaks. Some of them have been known before they take place. Others have been almost spontaneous. But last night in Birmingham, our reporter Charlie Peters has spoken to some of the people who were affected last night. There seemed to have been some information put out that the EDL or far-right protesters were going to gather. And so there appeared to be hundreds of mostly Asian heritage young lads, essentially, who gathered there, and it did break out into violence, and there didn't appear to be any police presence at all. Why do you suspect that was? Because that's why people are sort of talking about two-tier policing.
Yeah, well, I think the point is here, as I've just briefly mentioned, is the information and the intelligence. There was some suggestion that there was going to be some EDL presence. Many people from the community, given what's been going on over the last week and the fact that mosques have been damaged or attempted to be damaged, hotels have been set on fire. In Burnley, you had a cemetery which has been vandalised by thugs. So the police would only work on the basis of that kind of intelligence. So the community, is the point I was making, came out to that. Now, it's clear that there have been some breakout groups, and I absolutely condemn any of the violence by any of those individuals, and the incident that took place at the Clumsy Swan was absolutely awful. Those individuals need to be brought to justice. The police should be taking up some form of an investigation on that. I am pleased, on a positive note, not that this justifies any of the actions, that the Muslim elders from the community came forward. They went into the pub and they made huge apologies on behalf of what had actually happened, because they said this is not them. And there's been some agreement, as you mentioned earlier on, that the mosque will pay for the damage to that, because it's clear there are people there, including those in the pub, many members of the community that want community cohesion with all different faiths and background, and none. So this was an incident that was absolutely unacceptable and needs to be addressed. And I hope that Birmingham, the West Mids Police, are already onto this to identify those individuals, to bring them to justice. And then on the other hand, you had what went on in Plymouth. I watched that live as it played out. Absolutely horrific scenes of police officers being assaulted. Really difficult and challenging times for police officers in terms of how they have to police these, plus also the public scrutiny and the criticism by the members of the public, or why aren't these individuals being being arrested so quickly, and why haven't police come along and taken them off the streets immediately? It's not as easy as that, because if you take resources off the street, then you are not being able to police and protect the public immediately.
Shabnam, how much of a challenge is social media nowadays, and everybody having access to a smartphone who can film every single instance that police are involved with? Because there seems to be now an extra level of scrutiny which appears to be adding to the narrative of the so-called two-tier policing or anything else that's going on with these riots.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the two-tier policing is the word of the day at the moment, but social media plays a huge part. There are huge benefits to social media because of the fact that people do gather evidence and they are able to pass it on to the appropriate authorities for them to be able to then investigate it. On the other hand, when you see short clips of something, people make an assumption, they speculate, they then spread misinformation, as we are fully aware. I'm sorry to say that Lee Anderson is one of those people that spread information last week that there was a hotel with asylum seekers in there, when it actually turned out that there were NHS nurses that were staying there. So this is a kind of misinformation that needs to be addressed and needs to be stopped. Very, very difficult to manage. I understand that Sakir has talked about dealing with those online, those that are instigating, that are inciting race, hate, any form of violence need also to be held to account. And that also includes the tech giants.
Yeah, because the thing is with social media is that it can shine a light on things that the mainstream media have missed. So it is a tool for the public to know exactly what is happening on the ground. But as you say, also it is a tool for spreading misinformation very quickly indeed. And that's going to be a big challenge for this government. I personally hope that they don't go down the authoritarian route, but we shall see. Just on this news that we're hearing from police sources that there are potentially up to 30 more of these types of protests or potentially that could descend into riots planned over the next couple of days. I mean, how does the police even begin to approach that?
Well, every force has a different number of officers. So when you're looking at the smaller forces, they will have less resources to be able to deploy to those areas. In collaboration, you will have many of the forces where police officers from London, for example, will potentially go to Devon and Cornwall or to any of the other forces, and they will have to do some cross-border work together. I didn't realise about the 30 that are planned for today. That is really scary, and I understand that there's a significant number again.
That's tomorrow, Shabnam.
Oh, it's tomorrow, yeah, tomorrow. So they will be as well prepared as they possibly can be. And if there is any significant intelligence to suggest that violence is likely and there's a strong likelihood of it, then obviously they have the option to make a decision as to whether or not to allow those protests to go ahead. But we haven't heard anything at the moment. These are going to be really difficult times for policing. I genuinely feel for them. I'm the first to criticise them if it needs to be done. But these are officers that are just normal frontline officers that work in everyday policing, trying to deal with business as usual, neighbourhood officers, emergency
absolutely.
response officers,
I mean,
and so
absolutely.
on.
A lot of them are, some of the bravest members of our society, really. Shabnam Chowdhury, thank you very much, former Detective Superintendent in the Metropolitan Police. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, coming up, we're speaking to a former RMT union boss as the government says it will repeal the Minimum Levels of Service Act. That's after your headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good afternoon to you. It's just after 1:30. A top story today. The government has confirmed it's preparing more than 500 additional prison places to deal with rioters, as hundreds come before the courts today. It comes after violent protests continued overnight, with bricks and fireworks being thrown at officers up and down the country and petrol bombs thrown in Belfast. A former head of the UK's counter-terror police force has said it's now time to start treating the worst of the riots as terrorism. It comes a week on now since 3 children were stabbed to death in Southport, and the government says it's investigating whether state actors are spreading disinformation and fueling the violence. A solicitor of a man who was kicked in the head by a police officer at Manchester Airport says the family is a victim of a smear campaign. Amma Anwar says Fahir Ammaz's mother was racially abused on the plane before the events of last month. He also accused officers of not having body cams turned on during the incident. Three water companies are facing a combined record fine of £168 million after a series of failings, including sewage spills. Thames Water, Northumbrian Water and Yorkshire Water were issued the penalty by regulator Ofwat. A report revealed appalling conditions and chaos at Wandsworth Prison in London, with concerns about violence, self-harm and drugs. The findings highlight concerns including safety, staffing and overcrowding. The government's confirmed a £100 million funding package over the next 5 years and is promising additional staffing. A new law banning some people in key industries from going on strike will be overturned. Minimum service levels were brought in by the Conservatives to keep some sectors running after more than a year of disruptive industrial action. However, the new Labour government says removing the law as part of an employment rights bill will reset industrial relations. Stock markets around the world are now bouncing back after falling sharply yesterday over fears the US economy is heading for recession. London's FTSE 100 suffered its biggest fall since July of last year. And just a quick breaking line for you coming to us out of Israel this afternoon. We understand that a number of unidentified hostile unmanned aerial vehicles have crossed into Israeli territory from Lebanon, with several civilians reported to be injured. Hezbollah has claimed responsibility for the swarm of attack drones. The armed group's also warning that its much anticipated retaliation for the death of a top commander last week, they say, is yet to come. It's the latest escalation as fears are rising the Middle East could be tipped into a full-blown war. Those are the latest headlines for now. I'm Sam Francis. Much more in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick look at the markets this afternoon for you. The pound will buy you $1.2688 and €1.1627. The price of gold this hour, £1,894.21 per ounce. And the FTSE 100's currently at 7,982 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Hello, here's your latest GB News weather forecast coming to you from the Met Office. Many of us will see some sunny spells through today, but there will also be plenty of showers, especially towards the northwest, and we have had some persistent rain pushing its way through. That's due to a front that is now starting to clear its way towards the east, but it is lingering across parts of East Anglia, Kent, bringing a bit more cloud here, and also some outbreaks of rain as we go through the afternoon. Elsewhere though, some sunny spells for most places, also quite a few showers, especially across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Here, some of them could be on the heavy side. We have got some fresher air coming in behind this front, and so that means temperatures are a bit lower than of late, still just about getting into the mid-20s, perhaps towards the south. Now, as we go into this evening, there will be plenty more showers, particularly across all western parts of Scotland. Still some heavy downpours quite likely. A slightly drier theme for eastern parts of Scotland, but even here, a few showers pushing through. Plenty of showers also for Northern Ireland, and some pushing into western parts of northern England. The northeast likely to stay largely dry. Down the eastern side of England, also a generally fine end to the day, but a few showers pushing in across parts of Wales and southwest England as we go through the evening. Some of these showers will continue overnight, but all the time central eastern parts of England look like they'll stay dry with some clear skies. But across Scotland and Northern Ireland, showers continuing for a time, and then some heavier persistent rain pushing into western parts of Scotland as we head towards dawn tomorrow. Temperatures will be a touch lower than some recent nights, particularly towards the south, getting into low teens for some of us. As we go through tomorrow then, a showery wet picture across parts of Scotland, some persistent rain for a time through the morning, but a lot of that will clear northwards as we go towards the afternoon, and elsewhere plenty of showers around and a bit of a cool breezy feel to things, and so temperatures, although similar to today, it may feel a little bit cooler, especially with a bit more cloud around. Bye-bye.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. The A65 in Giggleswick in North Yorkshire remains shut between Cravenbank Lane and the B6480. Investigation work continues there following an earlier collision. Now there's queues westbound on the M62 at the moment. Junction 19 Hayward through towards Simister Island at 18. A lane shut for a vehicle fire causing queues for around about 20 minutes. Back to the Rochdale turn-off at Junction 20. Big queues southbound for the M1 around Milton Keynes. 13 down to Flitwick at 12 blocked. 3 lorries have had a collision there, causing queues in both directions. Clockwise M25 just after the Holmesdale Tunnel, queuing for 25 minutes. 2 lanes shut, there's a broken down lorry and a fuel spillage. And in Hendon in London, Finchley Lane is shut by Parsons Street in queuing. It's all due there to an accident. And for now, that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back. It's 20 to 2. Now, a new law banning some people in key industries from going on strike will now be overturned.
Yes, minimum service levels were brought in by the Conservatives to keep some sectors running after more than a year of disruptive industrial action, including junior doctors and rail strikes, or at least that was the aim.
Now, Labour says removing the law will reset industrial relations, but will this cause even more disruption?
Well, we're joined by former RMT union boss Steve Headley. Steve, thank you very much indeed. What's wrong with minimum service levels? Steve, are you there?
Well, they were a gimmick. Yes, I am. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. So they were a gimmick brought in by the Tories. No employer ever used them. There was one employer, North East London Railway, who tried to bring them in for a one-day strike, and the railway unions responded by saying, OK, we won't have a one-day strike, we'll have a 5-day strike instead. And then the employers quickly dropped the plan to use the minimum legislation. So they were a gimmick. They were never employed, even by the employers. They never used them, and it's only right that they should be getting rid of.
And yet, Steve, this country faced a lot of strikes last year in particular. The NHS, the industrial action in the NHS last year cost taxpayers £1.7 billion. And a lot of the public were very frustrated by this. So does this new change of law from Labour create more of an issue and give perhaps unions a free pass to strike further?
No, because as I pointed out, the minimum legislation law was never used by any employer, never used by the NHS, never even used on the railways, so it wasn't used. But the fact is this: in a democratic society, bargaining power should be used by the unions to get better wages, better conditions for their members. You shouldn't have government interference. It's a free market when the government want it to be, but it's a very limited market when the Tory government don't want it to be. And the industrial disputes should be sorted out between the employer and the representative.
Well, hang on, Steve. We're
employees,
mostly talking about public services here, aren't we? That are funded by the taxpayer. So we're not really talking about free markets or issues with private employers.
No.
Is there not a responsibility from trade unions that represent public service workers to think of the consumer, to think of the patient, to think of the rail passenger and the like?
Well, obviously, I thought you would have known that the railway industry has been privatised for nearly 30 years.
Well, it's a bit of a mixed situation, isn't it?
No, it's going to be renationalised, but at the moment, the train operating companies and the rolling
OK, well, let's
stock
go for the NHS then, Steve.
So the NHS was suffering from a position where inflation was rampant. People's wages had been cut in real terms by about a fifth because of the rampant inflation. The pay rises, there were pay freezes actually for years in the NHS. And you got to a point where no one wanted to work in the NHS. There was hundreds of thousands of vacancies for nurses and for paramedics, even for junior doctors. Some of them who were working for £15 an hour. You could get more on the night shift on Tesco's. And rather than exacerbate these industrial relations problems by bringing in pointless legislation which is going to further poison industrial relations, and I'm no fan of Keir Starmer at all, or this new Labour government, but what they've actually done is sat down with the responsible bodies, the trade unions, and hammered out a deal which will restore some of the wages that's been lost by those members in the junior doctors. And I hope that that's an approach that they will take throughout the public sector.
So how do you think this has affected the relationship between union bosses and the government?
Well, see, this term union boss is what you have in unions. It's not like GB News. You just don't have a boss. What you have is elected officials. And I was an elected official. So if people don't like their elected officials, they can vote them out, not like your organisation. Or indeed, I'd imagine they had the Tory party. But what we have is we have industrial relations that have been stymied by the government that has just gone out. What we had is a massive redistribution of wealth towards the friends of the Conservatives. We now have a few billionaires in this country that have nearly 40% of the entire country. If you take it in terms of gross domestic product, they've got about 40% of the wealth.
Steve, what has that got to do with minimum service levels? I mean, minimum service levels weren't just brought in this country. I mean, across Europe you have them. Indeed, in Germany, civil servants aren't even allowed to strike. Surely there has to be a balance here, Steve. That's what people are concerned by. They're concerned that essentially the Labour government, the new government, may be potentially giving sort of a free pass now for the unions to go on strike whenever they like. They don't even have to commit to any minimum service at all. So we could have the NHS just cease to perform for days on end, potentially. Steve, that's the worry.
Well, the problem is because of the number of vacancies, because of the per pay, the per conditions, the amount of shifts that people have to cover in order to give any sort of service in the NHS due to vacancies and people leaving, you don't have an NHS that's functioning at all. And what you have is a complete correlation between the distribution of wealth in a society. If the people in the NHS don't get a fair wage raise in line with inflation, then they will leave. And that money has been taken by the upper part of society. We've got a cast of billionaires now who are monopolising the wealth of this country. And I only hope that the Labour government can do something about this. And, I'll reiterate once again, because you don't seem to be hearing me, not one organisation, not one employer's organisation has actually used the minimum service legislations because they know it's pointless, because instead of going on strike for one day, the unions will just go on strike for 2 or 3. It will be completely counterproductive. It's another gimmick like the Rwanda gimmick. The Tory party were absolutely famous for using gimmicks when they should have been sitting down and negotiating the settlements.
Okay.
And that's what happened. It completely backfired.
OK, well, thank you very much indeed, Steve Headley. Great to talk to you, former RMT union boss. We'll use that word, elected official. Thank you very much, Steve Headley. It sounds as though, if you get rid of the billionaires, it'll all be sorted.
Yeah, do let us know what you think. gbnews.com/your say. I mean, what is the solution then? If you can't, if people are being forced are allowed to strike, how are they going to solve this money issue with work and conditions when there isn't a magic money tree?
Well, coming up, a teen in Yorkshire says she's lucky to be alive after being mauled by a 50-kilo Rescue XL bully dog whilst working at an animal shelter. She says, unbelievably, that she doesn't think these dogs should be banned. We'll bring you the story after this.
Patrick Christie's Tonight. Weekdays from 9 p.m.
Should Prince Harry have accepted an award named after a US war hero at a glitzy ceremony last night? People begged him not to, but he did it anyway. It's time for tonight's head-to-head. Well, Prince Harry paid tribute to the eternal bond between mother and son as he appeared alongside his wife, Meghan Markle, at the glitzy ESPY Awards, dubbed the Sporting Oscars last night. The Duke accepted the Pat Tillman Award, named after a US war hero, for his Invictus Games work. But Harry's decision to accept the award was shrouded in controversy after more than 76,000 people signed a petition demanding he reverse his decision. Well, speaking last night, Harry paid tribute to Pat Tillman's mother, Mary. But that comes after Mary Tillman slammed his decision to give Prince Harry the gong, saying, "I am shocked as to why they would select such a controversial and divisive individual to receive the award. There are recipients that are far more fitting. These individuals do not have the money, resources, connections or privilege that Prince Harry has." So tonight I'm asking, Should Harry have actually accepted the award? Let me know your thoughts. Go to gbnews.com/your say. Tweet me at GBNews and make sure you take part in our poll. But going head-to-head on this now, a former Royal Butler, Grant Harold, and the journalist and broadcaster, Laurie Turner. Thank you very much. Great to have you both on the show. Laurie, I will start with you. I mean, the mother didn't want Harry to have it, but he did it anyway. What do you think?
I just think it's incredibly tone deaf. He seems to have an amazing ability to not read the room. It wasn't like this was a surprise because the opposition to him getting this award had been growing. So he had the chance to say, actually, I hear what you're saying. I'm not going to accept the award. But he didn't.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Right, it's 1:50. Good afternoon, Britain. Now let's get to some of your views. Greg's got in touch, he says, and so it begins. Unions holding the country to ransom. Who's the 2024 Thatcher to crush this madness? Also, railways, even when they're not on strike, the system is a joke.
Yeah, I guess we'll find out in November when we hear who the next Tory leader is going to be. Nick says, I'm never seen a poor train driver. How much for sitting on rails? 60, 70, 100k a year? What a scam.
Not much sympathy, eh?
No.
Not much sympathy. Trudy says, when were ASLEF not on strike? I can't answer that. I can't answer you that, Trudy.
Occasionally you can get a train, but yes, I do get your point. It is incredibly frustrating when there's strike days.
I mean, the difficulty is if the minimum service levels, weren't actually being enacted by our public services, then it's true that there's no use for them, really, is there? But what annoys me is that these things aren't actually particularly authoritarian. If you compare to other countries in Europe, there are minimum service levels already, and there are also quite a lot of strikes, quite a lot of public services where strikes are just completely prohibited.
And it's not just train drivers, it's NHS workers as well, some of which are incredibly underpaid and want a fair deal. And GPs, I think, are next, aren't they, to be perhaps doing some industrial action. So we'll have to see how Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, handles that one.
It was quite interesting listening to Steve Headley there, because, of course, it always comes back to the millionaires and the billionaires. Sydney's gone in starts. Says Steve was spewing out the socialist myth that the economy is a cake, and if you take money off the rich and give it to the poor, we'll have a fairer society. No, the economy is like a train with business the engine, without which there is no money for anyone else. Those in the public sector have a duty to provide the service they are paid to provide. The difficulty, that's the difficulty, isn't it? Because, a lot of people, and I would say the majority of people, actually want nurses and they want doctors to be paid more, but there do have to be productivity gains at the same time, surely, in order to fund it.
Yeah, exactly. And I just remember kind of in 2020 when on a Thursday evening we'd all be clapping for the NHS outside of houses, and now many people are incredibly frustrated that there seems to be continued strike action taking place in different sections of the NHS. And I think during the Labour campaign at the general election, they said they would sort this issue. So how long is it going to take?
And Nick says NHS staff will not work a structured rota. They work overtime and on agency staff during strikes because they know they get paid megabucks. That's a massive issue as well. A lot of people, I mean, some nurses, for example, will stop working for the NHS in a traditional way and get paid far more by just going through an agency.
Yeah.
And, I mean, it's good for them to make a bit more extra cash, but I'm not sure if it's good for the NHS as a whole.
But there's a danger of a staffing shortage, because I I know a number of junior doctors who are considering emigrating to Australia because they have a much better work-life balance and far better pay than they would have on the NHS at the moment.
That is true. That is true. And it's the truth. If you don't pay people enough, then they're going to look elsewhere.
They certainly will.
And to other industries. Anyway, coming up, more than 400 people have now been arrested in the wake of the disorder around the country. Police are now preparing for further violence over the next 2 days. We'll have the very latest after this. Stay with us.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, here's your latest GB News weather forecast coming to you from the Met Office. Many of us will see some sunny spells through today, but there will also be plenty of showers, especially towards the northwest, and we have had some persistent rain pushing its way through. That's due to a front that is now starting to clear its way towards the east, but it is lingering across parts of East Anglia, Kent, bringing a bit more cloud here and also some outbreaks of rain as we go through the afternoon. Elsewhere, though, some sunny spells for most places, also quite a few showers, especially across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Here, some of them could be on the heavy side. We have got some fresher air coming in behind this front, and so that means temperatures are a bit lower than of late, still just about getting into the mid-20s, perhaps towards the south. Now, as we go into this evening, there will be plenty more showers, particularly across all western parts of Scotland. Still some heavy downpours quite likely. A slightly drier theme for eastern parts of Scotland, but even here, a few showers pushing through. Plenty of showers also for Northern Ireland and some pushing into western parts of northern England. The northeast likely to stay largely dry. Down the eastern side of England, also a generally fine end to the day, but a few showers pushing in across parts of Wales and southwest England as we go through the evening. Some of these showers will continue overnight, but all the time central eastern parts of England look like they'll stay dry with some clear skies. But across Scotland and Northern Ireland, showers continuing for a time, and then some heavier persistent rain pushing into western parts of Scotland as we head towards dawn tomorrow. Temperatures will be a touch lower than some recent nights, particularly towards the south, getting into low teens for some of us. As we go through tomorrow then, a showery wet picture across parts of Scotland, some persistent rain for a time through the morning, but a lot of that will clear northwards as we go towards the afternoon, and elsewhere plenty of showers around and a bit of a cool breezy feel to things, and so temperatures, although similar to today, it may feel a little bit cooler, especially with a bit more cloud around. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Don't miss out on your chance to win a whopping £30,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. It's extra cash that could really make a difference to your coming year. You could find yourself on that holiday you've always wanted to take, buy that treat that always seemed out of reach, or just send some of those day-to-day financial stresses packing. £30,000 could be yours. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes. Thank you for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 2 o'clock on Tuesday, the 6th of August. I'm Emily Carver.
And I'm Cameron Walker.
Britain in chaos. More than 400 people now arrested in the wake of disorder around the country. Officers are anticipating more disruption as they monitor reports of at least 30 possible gatherings tomorrow. And we're just hearing there has been an emergency cabinet meeting. We'll bring you the latest from that.
Also, war of words. Number 10 has condemned comments made by billionaire Elon Musk, claiming civil war is inevitable in the UK, as well as slamming suggestions that there is a two-tier policing system.
And the lawyer for the family who clashed with police officers at Manchester Airport last month has spoken out at a televised press conference with fresh allegations. We'll have the latest.
And the silver girl turns golden. Keely Hodgkinson emerged victorious at the Olympic 800-metre final in Paris last night, cruising across the finish line in under 2 minutes.
Yes, so we're going to be hearing in just a couple of minutes from Christopher Hope, our political editor who's in Westminster for us, see what's been spoken about in this cabinet meeting. Of course, we're hearing reports that there may be up to 30 planned protests, gatherings across the country in the next couple of days. So I'm sure that'll be front and centre of what they're discussing.
Yeah, it certainly will be. Send us your views on that. gbnews.com/your say. Of course, we had a Cobra meeting yesterday with a number of those involved in trying to clear up these rioters. Now, just, of course, the government cabinet minister. So we'll be speaking to Chris Hope, our political editor, very shortly, of course.
We will indeed. And just on that Elon Musk story, now, Elon Musk is very much getting involved in what's going on in Britain with these protests, these violent riots and the like. He's essentially suggesting that there's a system of two-tier policing when it comes to these protests. He's saying that we could descend into civil war. In fact, he said it's inevitable. Now, Number 10 have been absolutely adamant that that is wrong. They've called it inflammatory. They said it's deplorable. Various ministers and spokespeople for the government have said this. But it's very interesting because they've also been talking about clamping down on social media disinformation. Will Elon Musk be target number 1?
Exactly. And, of course, civil war, incredibly strong words coming from a billionaire living in California. How much say does he really have in the political decisions of the United Kingdom? The fact that the Prime Minister's been forced to respond to these comments of Elon Musk online is quite extraordinary. You'd never expect that a decade ago, would you?
Yes, and Keir Starmer said very strongly, didn't he, that he believes that those who are found to be inciting violent protests online should receive just as harsh a penalty as those who actually go along and join in physical reality with these protests and the violence that has accompanied them far too often. So could it be that people like Elon Musk, of course not Elon Musk himself,
I can't imagine him
is in a different territory, but people who have been seen to be, saying inflammatory comments like that.
And Elon Musk, of course, a huge advocate for free speech, but of course there's a fine line between free speech and inciting violence.
We shall see. Now, let's get the headlines with Sam because he's got some breaking news.
Cameron, Emily, thank you very much indeed. Just after 2 o'clock, and as you mentioned there, we'll start with that breaking news coming to us from the United States this afternoon. We understand that Vice President Kamala Harris has now picked her running mate for the November election. According to sources from the Reuters news agency, that pick is Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. He will be her vice president candidate for the 2024 election on the 5th of November. According to sources, though, Harris has not yet made a call to Tim Walz. So that news just into us from sources here at GB News that Kamala Harris, current vice president, has picked her running mate, Governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz. That's part of a short list of all white men who had a record of winning over rural and white and independent voters. The decision she's made reportedly will, of course, be pivotal as Harris prepares to challenge Donald Trump in the upcoming election, following, of course, President Biden's exit from the race to the White House. The candidate, we believe, will be informed later today, although, as I said earlier, we believe that Harris has not yet made a call to her picked running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. So that news just into us. Cameron, and Emily have plenty more on that, I'm sure, throughout the rest of this afternoon. Back here, though, the government has confirmed more than 500 additional prison places are going to be brought into use to deal with rioting as dozens more people appear before the courts. A number of people charged with violent disorder have already pleaded guilty to their part in the widespread violence. Among them, a child aged just 15 who arrived before magistrates in Liverpool today with his mum. That was after he was identified from a video on TikTok. Meanwhile, police say they do absolutely expect more arrests to be made today after another night of violence in various cities across the country. Rioting in England and in parts of Northern Ireland have continued to grow from initial misinformation surrounding a stabbing attack in Southport. Overnight in Devon, fireworks and stones were thrown, injuring several police officers, and a police dog was also hit with a brick in Staffordshire, while footage online shows petrol bombs and missiles being thrown at police in Belfast. A solicitor of a man who was kicked in the head by a police officer at Manchester Airport says the family is a victim of a smear campaign. Amma Anwar says Fahia Amaz's mother was racially abused on a plane before the events of last month. He's also accused officers of not having body cams turned on during that incident.
Ahmad and his mother Shamim were shocked at the unnecessary aggression and violence, alleged violence, shown from the start. There was no immediate attempt to speak to Fahia, to ask him to step aside, to caution him, or to simply say, "Can we speak to you for a second?"
In Wales, Eluned Morgan has been selected as First Minister. She's the first woman to take on that role. She was confirmed in a vote of the Senedd members earlier after the Welsh Parliament was recalled from summer recess. The leader of the Welsh Labour Party marked the occasion in her speech, declaring the grey suits are out and said that she hopes to add a vibrant splash of colour to the role. Well, shocking levels of chaos at Wandsworth Prison are reportedly taking place in plain view of leaders. That's according to a new report. The prison's inspector found the London jails not safe, with rampant violence, drug use and overcrowding there. Despite nearly £900,000 invested since the alleged escape of Daniel Califf, staff still failed to account for prisoners during the day. The Ministry of Justice says it will pledge £100 million for improvements, but critics are now calling for an urgent change in leadership. 3 water companies are facing a combined record fine of £168 million after a series of failings were found, including sewage spills. Thames Water, Northumbrian Water and Yorkshire Water were issued that penalty by the regulator Ofwat, with Thames Water facing the biggest fine of the 3. That's £104 million. Well, just an update on news we brought to you in the last half hour or so. A number of hostile and unmanned aerial vehicles have crossed into Israel from Lebanon, with several civilian casualties reported. Hezbollah has claimed responsibility for the swarm of attack drones, but warns that much stronger attacks are still to come, they say. The latest escalation comes as fears are rising that the Middle East could be tipped into full-blown war after leaders of the Lebanese militant group and Hamas were assassinated last week. Back to the US, and a judge has ruled that Google acted illegally to maintain a monopoly on online searches. They said the tech giant paid tens of millions of dollars annually to ensure its search engine was a default on smartphones and browsers. But its parent company, Alphabet, says it will appeal that decision. Stock markets around the world have now started to bounce back after falling sharply yesterday over fears the US economy is heading for recession. London's FTSE 100 suffered its biggest fall since July of last year. And in Asia, shares closed with a big drop, the biggest fall since 1987's Black Monday. And Great Britain's equestrian team have finished the Paris Games with 5 medals, including 2 golds, though they weren't able to add any more to this morning's individual show jumping. Meanwhile, Keely Hodgkinson's become just the 10th British woman to win athletics gold. She stormed across the line in the 800 metres last night. And Team GB also set a new world record in the women's team sprint track cycling, bringing the total medal haul to now 12 golds so far, putting Great Britain 5th in the medal table. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. Plenty more with Cameron and Emily on that breaking news out of the US up next.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome back. It's 10 minutes past 2. As Sam was saying just then, Kamala Harris, the Democratic presidential candidate, has chosen her running mate, according to US sources speaking to the Reuters news agency. It's the Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, as I say, stressing, according to sources. We have not had that independently confirmed here at GB News. But that would be a progressive policy champion and I quote, a plain speaker from America's heartland to help win over rural white voters, and that's what the sources have been saying. He's 60 years old, a US Army veteran and a former teacher, so it'll be interesting to see how that goes down in the US heartlands.
Yes, could this be quite a smart move from Kamala Harris? Again, This is being reported now by US media. We're going to get some more analysis on this. Who exactly is Tim Walz? Who is he going to appeal to? As you say, a history in the armed forces, extensive National Guard career. He's being described as a popular Midwestern politician. Could this change the game?
Yeah, he's long advocated for women's reproductive rights, but he's also displayed some pretty conservative views when he represented a rural district in the US House, including defending agricultural interests and, crucially, backing gun rights and gun legislation, which is really interesting because that is not what I would expect Kamala Harris to be advocating for. I think she's quite anti-gun laws in the United States in terms of everybody rights to bear arms.
Yes, and this is all very interesting because if you look at the latest polls, if you've been following this, Kamala Harris is now ahead 4 points. That's in a survey that was released on Monday. So Kamala Harris leading Donald Trump now 48% to 44% among registered voters. That's their highest lead, the Democrats' highest lead in nearly a year over Donald Trump. That was a poll by Morning Consult. So it'll be interesting to see what this latest news that Tim Walz may well be her running mate, has been chosen according to sources, according to media in the United States. So what impact will that have? We're going to bring you some more analysis on that. But let's return to domestic politics.
Yeah, now more than 400 people have been arrested in the wake of disorder around the country, with the number expected to continue to rise in the coming days.
Yes, police are now aware of 6 potential events today, and officers are anticipating a busy day tomorrow as well as they monitor reports of at least 30 possible gatherings. And in the last few minutes, we've heard there has been an emergency cabinet meeting.
Well, let's cross now to political editor Christopher Hope at GB News in Westminster. Chris, just bring us up to date with this emergency cabinet meeting that's been happening today.
Yes, hello both. Well, yesterday lunchtime, we were told the government's plans for the week. It did not include a cabinet meeting today. That's because in parliamentary recess, the cabinet doesn't normally meet. But Overnight or this morning, we don't know when, Sir Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, felt he had to call a cabinet in response to the unrest across the country. The first we heard about it at GB News, and in fact all of the political lobby who cover politics in this country, is when we got a statement saying the cabinet had met. So in a sense it met in secret, although of course they knew about it, and certainly an emergency cabinet meeting to address the shocking outbreak of violence, the government says, across the country. The PM said this: when he went to Southport, he said, "I spoke to police who described what it was like to attend the mass stabbing of little girls and then be back on duty the next day in riot gear, having bricks thrown at them. This is something no one would ever wanted to see, and we need to be calling it out for what it is. It's not protest, it's violent disorder, and needs to be treated as such as criminal activity." That's Sir Keir Starmer. He finished 99.9% of people across the country want their streets to be safe and to feel safe in their communities, and we will take all necessary steps or action to bring this order to an end. There were updates to this meeting, held hybrid and in person, from the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, from the Attorney General, the Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner, the Technology Secretary, about the issue of social media and its involvement. And also they did talk also about the Middle East and rising tensions there. It comes amid concern, I think, and certainly amongst, we're seeing from GB News viewers and listeners, about the way there was talk of a double standard, a two-tier policing. That is denied by the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer. But Robert Jenrick, who's a favourite to replace Rishi Sunak as the opposition, the Tory leader in November, he's issued quite an interesting statement on Twitter, on social media. Here's what he had to say.
The far right, who attacked a mosque, are a disgrace. The thugs attacking police officers are a disgrace. The arsonists, who set fire to a hotel with people inside, are a disgrace. The racists attacking black or Asian Britons are a disgrace. And the sectarian gangs, marching through towns and cities waving weapons, and in some cases attacking white Britons, are a disgrace. None of this is who we are. We must show no squeamishness or selectivity. All this violence must be called out. There's no room for moral confusion or weakness in this moment. From this point forward, anyone who carries a weapon on the street, attacks the police, or launches racist ambushes on people from other communities must be sent to prison for the longest possible term.
That was a Robert Jenrick there, and his team make very clear he's criticising other politicians, not the police, over these riots and the response. I should say, just while I'm on air, that Elon Musk, who owns Twitter, has made more critical comments in the past hour about the UK. He's over a tweet about some arrests for people, remarks made on Facebook. Elon Musk says the following: arrested for making comments on Facebook. Is this Britain or the Soviet Union? This battle between the social media world and politics is by no means over.
Yes, and I've also just seen him use the hashtag two-tier Keir. He really is taking it to the UK government. We'll be following that. Thank you very much indeed, Christopher Hope, our political editor. We'll catch up with you in a little bit. It's quite interesting as well. James Cleverly, he's in the leadership contest for the Conservatives. He's saying, you know, it's all well and good talking about having a standing army of specialist police officers, but what exactly does that mean? If you're going to use the word standing army, you know, what extra powers are they going to have? Are they going to be on other duties? Or are they going to be taken off their usual duties? How does this actually work in practice?
And do they have the right intelligence to know where they need to be at the right time as well? Because clearly in Birmingham yesterday, they were not there when they were needed.
Well, quite. Well, let's return to that breaking news that US media is saying Kamala Harris has reportedly chosen Tim Walz as her vice presidential pick for the 2024 US election.
Well, we're joined now by US and international politics professor Scott Lucas. Scott, thank you so much for joining us at short notice. Just explain to us kind of why Harris may well have chosen Tim Walz and whether she is hoping that could pip Donald Trump to the post for the White House.
So Tim Walz, 60 years old, a educator, started off as a teacher, then Army National Guard, 12 years as a congressman from Minnesota in a Republican district. So a Democrat who kept getting reelected in an area where the majority of people might not normally vote Democrats, and then as a two-term governor of Minnesota. In all of those positions, whether as a teacher, whether in the military, whether in politics, he has tended to get support, indeed praise, from across the political spectrum. He is ranked the 7th most bipartisan member of Congress when he was there, which in other words, the ability to walk across the aisle. He is pretty much a centrist on economic issues, but moves towards the progressive wing on issues like women's reproductive rights, supported legalization of cannabis. But I think perhaps most importantly in the past few weeks, what impressed the Harris campaign is he's very forthright. He speaks his mind. He is the guy who coined the term weird dudes for Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. In other words, in what has been a rapidly changing campaign, this is a man with a very well-established record, who is solid on the issues, who can take on Donald Trump if Trump wants to go with that insult-filled politics that usually marks his approach to elections.
So, Professor, are you saying that he will be a good communicator in this race? Because one thing that has been levelled at Kamala Harris is that she's not always the best at communicating. You know, there are lots of repetition, there's lots of ums and ahs, there's lots of pregnant pauses. Is this guy, going to be ruthless in the way he attacks this?
I mean, I wouldn't call him ruthless in the sense of being mean or petty. I think he is very well informed and very articulate. And I think he complements Harris as a communicator. Harris actually has, been very impressive since she replaced Joe Biden as the candidate. She's hit the ground running. She is falsely marked out as a radical or as an extremist, of course, by the Trumpists, when in fact she's quite the centrist. Where you get the balance between the two is you obviously get a racial balance, you get a gender balance, and you also get that ability, which is really important when you've got to cover several swing states that could be decisive, of having Harris in one place campaigning and having Walz in another place. And one final point, I think when they pick Tim Walz, they know that if there's to be a vice presidential debate this year, and we'll see if the Trump camp will actually go through with that he would be a pretty formidable opponent for J.D. Vance.
Scott, when Walz was representing a rural district in the US House, he defended both agricultural interests, but also perhaps slightly more controversially, gun legislation, gun rights. Is there a danger that he could clash with Kamala Harris over that issue in particular?
No, because I think when people put out the idea of gun rights, you've got to drill a little bit deeper down there. And that is that Tim Walz is not advocating full gun control. He's not talking about the type of system that we have in the UK, which is a very strict license system. But Tim Walz has supported, as have most Democrats, extending checks on guns, banning, for example, semi-automatic rifles, banning bump stocks, which turn guns into machine guns. Tim Walz comes from an area where there's a lot of hunting, where there are a lot of people who do own guns, but he's called for a responsible system of gun ownership, not just amongst individuals, but also for government regulation to limit that spread of gun-related violence that too often marks American society.
OK, well, it'll be very interesting to see whether this has an impact on those polls, which are at the moment showing Kamala ahead of Donald Trump, the highest lead, actually, in the past year. So thank you very much indeed, Professor Scott Lucas, US and international politics professor.
Thank you. Now, coming up, we're live in Belfast, where police have given an update in the last hour following violence on the streets last night, so don't go anywhere.
This
is GB News, Britain's news channel.
One local cricket team was made up entirely of one family, the Jollens.
The Newmarket midweek seconds played Thurlow and Old Millgreenian seconds, captained by, here we go, James Jolland. He played alongside family members Henry, Freddie, George, Jack, Archie, Ryan, Brandon and Daniel. Even if slightly controversial, one of the umpires was a Jolland to Stephen the umpire.
Yes, well, the Jolland family mostly live in Wickenbrook in Suffolk and have played for 4 years for Dullingham Village team before it merged with Newmarket. So that's the entire backstory. We're delighted to be joined now by Captain James Jolland and teammate and brother Nick Jolland. Really good to see you both this morning. This is incredible. How did you get the entire family involved in cricket?
Well, we started the club about 3 years ago, and it was more friends and family. But then it had this opportunity of this week to get everyone involved, because everyone was back and they all played cricket, various levels, and the youngest being 12, George, and we're all available. So we thought 1 week we'd do the whole team.
You booted the friends out for 1 week only?
Yeah, they were very good about it. They come and watched. They supported us.
How did the other team feel about having an umpire with related ties?
Well, the captain of the Thurlow is one of our friends. We do know him, so he was fine with it, and there was no controversial decisions at all.
I think it's a fantastic strategy.
No, yeah.
You could plant somebody.
That's the way
in a position of authority. It's a great idea.
Oh, look, here's the scorecard we can see on the screen with all of your names on there. Some fantastic English names on there. How does it get between the family members? Is it very, very competitive between you all?
As you get older, you work on that, don't you? And you keep that competitiveness out of it. And it's really to play with your sons. It's a great thing to do.
Yeah, it's a lovely
We've
thing
all
to
got
do.
sons in it. That's why we do it.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled. Lovely.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
This is the nightmare for the Conservatives again.
down to earth,
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
and most importantly, honest,
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It is 26 minutes past 2, and over in Belfast, riots continued last night. Several businesses were attacked. Police officers have also been reportedly injured.
Yes, and earlier this afternoon, a PSNI press conference took place where Temporary Assistant Chief Constable Melanie Jones gave a statement.
Well, we're joined now by GB News Northern Ireland reporter Doogie Beattie. Doogie, do tell us what's been happening.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to police headquarters. But the trouble here has really been sparking off in South Belfast. South Belfast is the main area of Northern Ireland that is taking the majority of immigrants into it. And it is, in parts, South Belfast is very strange. It has a very rich side to it and a very working class side to it. And the immigrants are being mainly put into that working class side. And what we're talking about is undocumented young males being pushed into those areas. And that is causing real tension in amongst those working class areas. Now, trouble started there on Saturday after a protest. And last night I was on the ground there and witnessed what was going on. And the police here have suggested that paramilitaries are involved in this so far. But last night it was mainly young men and young women in amongst them too. After the burning of a shop on Saturday, an attack on an Asian man, that the riots really started last night. So what we're now seeing is the outworkings of that, and many of the people here are actually saying to me on the ground, it's nothing to do with the knife attack. most of these community workers are telling me last night that it was actually the Rwanda bill. They were prepared to sit by and watch this go while they thought the Rwanda bill would stem the amount of young men coming in to Northern Ireland, and it did actually do that. In fact, most of them travelled south. Since that has happened, tensions have sparked off. Last night there was 300 officers here on the ground, many mobile support units. We have the benefit here, the police service, of firing plastic bullets. 2 of those were fired. 1 young man was hit in the hand with that. And ACC Melanie Jones did not rule out using water cannon. We have about 5 of those units in Northern Ireland. You've got to remember the police service here are well versed in dealing with public order offences. A short while ago she spoke, and this is what she had to say.
For the second evening, we have seen terrible events unfold in South Belfast. The scenes we have witnessed over the past few days have been horrendous. There's been violence, racist assaults, damage to property, arson, racist slurs unashamedly uttered on our streets. This is not who we are as a society, and the majority of our citizens are rightly appalled by this behaviour.
Well, you can see from Melanie Jones there, she is quite frustrated about what's going on, and of course that will dig in massively to an already cut police budget in Northern Ireland, and we are wondering who will pay for that. Will it be through Westminster, or will it be through the local devolved assembly here in Stormont?
OK, GB News Northern Ireland reporter Dougie Beattie, thank you for that update. Now, the family and lawyer of Fahir Ahmad and Mohammed Ahmad claim there was a deliberate campaign to smear them after a police officer appeared to kick and stamp on Fahir at Manchester Airport last month.
Yes, so the brothers, along with their lawyer and mother, expressed devastation and trauma over the incident. They also revealed that some family members are police officers with Greater Manchester Police themselves.
Well, our reporter Jack Carson was at that press conference earlier and joined us now. Jack, quite a lot of very serious allegations there against Greater Manchester Police.
Yes, certainly. This press conference really outlined, because the family lawyer essentially put it to us as the press, of course, that they wanted to fix the narrative that they say the media had misled, social media had misled the narrative on actually what had happened in, of course, this event. Now, this was a few weeks ago, if you remember, at Manchester Airport in Terminal 2, of course, and we had 2 different viral videos, didn't we, you know, that were across social media. One of them, of course, appears to show a police officer kicking a man on the floor in the head. The other, of course, with a man throwing punches at police officers, of course. And we know that after the incident, Greater Manchester Police confirmed that 3 officers had sustained head injuries and a broken nose in the incident. And they'd also confirmed that the 2 videos were one of 3 altercations in total, of course. But the family lawyer trying to set the narrative straight, really, in this press conference today. They say that the whole incident essentially started with Mrs. Acto, who's the mother of the 2 sons who were involved allegedly in that incident, of course, that it was on her flight from Pakistan. She was on a flight, and she was being given this tirade of racist and Islamophobic abuse from a gentleman sat behind her. She wasn't feeling well on the plane. They tried to move around the plane, find another seat to get away from this abuse. It was when she then came out, met her sons and grandsons within arrivals and leaving the airport, that they spotted this man that had allegedly been giving this abuse to their mother at Starbucks. Then the family lawyer simply explained it as an altercation and wouldn't really answer questions around what had gone on in that altercation. They say due to the fact that is still an active kind of criminal investigation. There are legal proceedings, of course, there, and so wouldn't go into details around what exactly that altercation was. And then it was when the family go to pay for parking that they say that officers grabbed Fahir, who's the young 19-year-old son in this incident. They allege that a police officer grabbed him by the wrists, including getting them in a neck hold and pushing them against the ticket machine. And that's when the altercation, they say, started to develop and started to escalate, with the sons asking the officers to remove, of course, his brother from the neck hold, and when then more altercation and more violence took place. Mohammed Ahmad, who's the 25-year-old, they say landed on the floor, and of course then we see, of course, what don't we, in the video, the allegations of what happens, and what really was described today as well was the shock and the trauma that this family have experienced, they say, and also, of course, the injuries that they allege an officer caused to the mother. The press were shown photos in that conference of injuries sustained to the mother, of bleeding and bruising below one of her eyes. They say that was alleged to have been caused by an officer who essentially used his taser to cause that injuries. And she said that her son, when she saw him tasered on the floor, she thought he was dead because of how limp he was. So lots of allegations coming out of this press conference. Of course, Greater Manchester Police referred themselves and the conduct of that officer to the IOPC, and of course that process is now underway in that independent investigation.
Well, thank you very much, Jack, for summarising that all for us. Quite a series of events outlined there, quite the allegations against the police. Thank you very much, Jack Carson, there in Manchester for us.
Now coming up, we're back in Birmingham following those horrific scenes from last night. That's after your headlines with Sam Francis. Very good afternoon to you. 2:34, the top story, and we start in the US, where reports are suggesting Kamala Harris has picked Minnesota Governor Tim Walz as her running mate for November's presidential election. It's understood, though, Harris hasn't yet made a call to Tim Walz to let him know he's been picked. However, the current vice president will be hoping the battle-tested Democrat who served more than a decade in Congress can help shore up her campaign in the critical upper Midwest region of the state. Her shortlist had included all white men with a record of winning over rural, white or independent voters, and the decision will, of course, be pivotal as Harris prepares to challenge Donald Trump in the upcoming November election, following President Biden's exit from that race. Here, the government has confirmed it's preparing more than 500 additional prison places to deal with rioters, as dozens more involved in disorder over the last week are appearing in court today. Last night in Plymouth in Devon, fireworks and stones were thrown, while there was also violence in Birmingham and Belfast, with police saying they do expect more disruption this week. A former head of the UK's counter-terror police force has said it's now time to start treating the worst of the riots as terrorism. Well, a week on since 3 children were stabbed to death in Southport, the government says it's now investigating whether state actors are spreading disinformation and fuelling the violence. It's been confirmed that the Conservatives' law, which demanded a minimum service was maintained during strikes, will be overturned. Unions alleged at the time it meant workers faced losing their job for walking out. However, the new Labour government says removing the law as part of an employment rights bill will, they say, reset industrial relations. Justice Secretary Shabana Mahmood says the prison system is in crisis as a new report reveals shocking levels of chaos at Wandsworth Prison. The findings highlight concerns including safety, staffing and overcrowding. The government, though, has confirmed a £100 million funding package over the next 5 years and promised additional staffing. 3 water companies are facing a combined record fine of £168 million after a series of failings, including sewage spills. Thames Water, Northumbrian Water and Yorkshire Water were issued that penalty by regulator Ofwat. And finally, some news coming to us from Israel this afternoon. We now know that a number of hostile and unmanned aerial vehicles have crossed into Israeli territory from Lebanon, with several civilian casualties reported there. Hezbollah, the military group, has claimed responsibility for that attack, being described as a swarm of attack drones. The armed group's also warning that its much anticipated retaliation for the death of a top commander last week is, they say, still to come. Israel saying they do expect the worst ahead. This latest escalation comes as fears are rising that the Middle East could be tipped into full-blown war. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sam Francis. That's it from me. Up next, Sophia Wensler will have your headlines at 3 o'clock.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thanks, Sam, for that. Well, we're joined now by GB News presenter Patrick Christys, who's got a big exclusive interview on his show tonight at 9 p.m. Patrick, tell us all about it.
Yes, well, thank you very much, both of you. Great show so far from you. But yes, I have got a big interview on my show, 9 to 11 p.m. tonight. It's Dame Priti Patel. It's her first televised interview since she was announcing that she's going to run for the Conservative leadership. I actually do have a couple of lines to tease for you now. She was absolutely scathing about Sir Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper. I asked her whether or not she thought that they'd actually made these protests worse. She also gave some very interesting views on two-tier policing and whether or not the perception is a reality that the police are more afraid of tackling Asian or Muslim gangs as they are members of other groups. She's got a few words for Jess Phillips. Also as well, a quite fascinating line from Priti Patel about what she would do with Suella Braverman if she became leader of the Conservative Party, and also why she thinks she's better than Robert Jenrick, who's been described by many as the favourite for the Conservative leadership. And there's even a mention in there about Elon Musk. There's been a lot of back and forth between our current Prime Minister and Elon Musk. So Priti Patel wades into that as well. It's a big interview, in case you couldn't tell. There's quite a lot to it, and it will be on my show 9 to 11 p.m. tonight.
Such a tease. I'm itching to know what she had to say there. You definitely teased that up for us. Yes, I just saw that Elon Musk, he's actually using the hashtag 2Keir Starmer. No, 2-tier...
2-tier Starmer.
2-tier Keir.
Oh, yeah, that's the one.
On Twitter. He's really getting stuck into the government, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. And can I just add just another quick one, which I forgot, which I should have mentioned as well. Potentially bad news for Nigel Farage if we had a Priti Patel leadership of the Conservative Party. I will be on Nigel's show later tonight and we'll have a clip for you of that. It will be interesting to get his reaction to it. So, yes, lots to go at, so you'll have to tune in 9 to 11 p.m. tonight.
Yeah, it certainly will be. A lot packed in, Patrick. Thank you so much for bringing us that update. We cannot wait to tune in.
Yeah, sounds good. You can watch Priti Patel's first TV interview since announcing her intention to become Conservative Party leader from 9 o'clock on Patrick Christie's tonight. So make sure you're there. It sounds like it's going to be quite juicy, indeed.
Absolutely. Coming up, we'll be back in Birmingham following those horrific scenes from last night. Do not go anywhere.
Hello, here's your latest GB News weather forecast coming to you from the Met Office. Many of us will see some sunny spells through today, but there will also be plenty of showers, especially towards the northwest, and we have had some persistent rain pushing its way through. That's due to a front that is now starting to clear its way towards the east, but it is lingering across parts of East Anglia, Kent, bringing a bit more cloud here, and also some outbreaks of rain as we go through the afternoon. Elsewhere, though, some sunny spells for most places, also quite a few showers, especially across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Here, some of them could be on the heavy side. We have got some fresher air coming in behind this front, and so that means temperatures are a bit lower than of late, still just about getting into the mid-20s, perhaps towards the south. Now, as we go into this evening, there will be plenty more showers, particularly across all western parts of Scotland. Still some heavy downpours quite likely. A slightly drier theme for eastern parts of Scotland, but even here, a few showers pushing through. Plenty of showers also for Northern Ireland and some pushing into western parts of northern England. The northeast likely to stay largely dry. Down the eastern side of England, also a generally fine end to the day, but a few showers pushing in across parts of Wales and southwest England as we go through the evening. Some of these showers will continue overnight, but all the time central eastern parts of England look like they'll stay dry with some clear skies. But across Scotland and Northern Ireland, showers continuing for a time, and then some heavier persistent rain pushing into western parts of Scotland as we head towards dawn tomorrow. Temperatures will be a touch lower than some recent nights, particularly towards the south, getting into low teens for some of us. As we go through tomorrow then, a showery wet picture across parts of Scotland, some persistent rain for a time through the morning, but a lot of that will clear northwards as we go towards the afternoon, and elsewhere plenty of showers around and a bit of a cool breezy feel to things, and so temperatures, although similar to today, it may feel a little bit cooler, especially with a bit more cloud around. Bye-bye.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. Issues in Scotland through Argyll and Bute. If you're heading for the old military road, the A83 shut at the moment around Inverary, and that's due to a collision causing queues. There's one as well in Norfolk affecting the eastbound A47. It's blocked away from the Deverham turnoff towards the Swanton Morley turnoff. That collision again causing queues. Now the southbound M1 is currently closed from Bedford Junction 13 down to Flitwick at 12. There's queues back towards Junction 11A on the northbound side as well. 3 lorries involved in a collision there. And the clockwise M25, the earlier breakdown has cleared. A fuel split is still being dealt with. 2 lanes out after Enfield 25 clockwise, causing queues for about 20 minutes back to Junction 24 at Potter's Bar. And for now, that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Well, let's return to our lead story today. It is 2:43 now. You're watching and listening to Good Afternoon Britain. Now, police are aware of 6 potential events today. Officers are anticipating a busy day tomorrow as they monitor reports of at least 30 possible gatherings. Now, this, of course, follows those horrific scenes from last night in Birmingham.
It certainly does. And Priti Patel has spoken to Patrick Christie's, GB News presenter, and he just talks about her reaction to all of this, the scenes both in Birmingham and, of course, Plymouth, where police officers were injured last night during those riots. She has scathing things to say, according to Patrick, about the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer.
Yes, we don't know what yet.
But we don't know what.
Yes, all a big tease for tonight. But, I mean, we've had this emergency cabinet meeting now, and lots discussed about the police response, lots of promises that there are going to be a standing army of specialist police officers to crack down on any violence that we may or may not see today and tomorrow. But I believe we're now joined by our national reporter, Charlie Peters, who is on the ground in Birmingham. He's been covering the events last night for us. Charlie, tell us what happened and what's been the fallout.
Well, the fallout is right now they're playing bingo, so that's the most important thing. In fact, one man who was sat at the table right here next to the entrance here that was smashed in last night's demonstration is actually hosting that event at the moment. So there is a sense of people trying to return to normality here, trying to get back to what this place should be about, a place to gather. But that's what it wasn't last night. Here at the Clumsy Swan in Yardley, people were gathering to have a bit of karaoke. It was a family event. We had children here, families here, grandchildren even inside the pub, when suddenly a mob descended on the location from a demonstration nearby in Bawdsley Green, about half a mile away. So they walked all the way up to this pub last night, and we saw significant scenes of disorder. We saw people throwing projectiles at the pub, trying to break in as well. The landlord here said that she used furniture to block up the entrance. She was rushing to do so, actually injured her hand in that process. So they actually came up that road just here behind me yesterday, marching for the best part of an hour from that earlier demonstration where journalists were intimidated. Several left the scene after machetes were brandished, knives were used to slash tyres, and there were 2 police cars reportedly there at that earlier demonstration. Started in response to rumours of a far-right protest, although that never occurred. Those alleged protesters never turned up. So it was just a demonstration from the local Muslim and South Asian community in retaliation, which then moved on. Some of the live streams from last night posted just outside this location here saw men saying they were on the way to this pub in order to dominate the area. They also said that they wanted to target a pub, one speaker on live stream said, because people here would be drinking and they're in the EDL and that would start a conflict. Now, people I've spoken to here said there was no police presence for a long time. I saw one interview with a police officer posted last night in which an officer said that the scenes here were just what they'd see in a normal Saturday night in town, those scuffles. Well, footage we've seen doesn't suggest that that was the case. But I spoke to one person earlier who was very angry about the lack of police presence and said that in reaction to that 2-tier policing conversation, her view on that had been reaffirmed by what she'd experienced last night.
There was no police presence at all, not until after everyone phoned from the pub to say like there was trouble going on, and there was machetes, knives, a lot of violence, a lot of antisocial behaviour, and there was no police around, not whatsoever. Even from the march on Boards Green Road, there was no police. Where was the police? They failed in every way possible yesterday.
We've seen them turn up here today, very briefly. Is it too little, too late in your view?
Definitely, 100%. Apparently, he's been saying that there was meant to be a huge police presence today. Can you see any police? There's no police around anywhere, is there?
There's a current discussion at the moment, isn't there, about so-called two-tier policing, that different groups get different levels of policing.
100%.
That happens in Birmingham?
Yes, 100%. 100%. It goes, I don't even know how to explain it. There's one rule for another and one rule for someone else.
You think it happened here last night?
Yeah, definitely, 100%. 100% happened. And the police failed us.
Well, this is a normally very peaceful area. The landlord at the pub here told me that what happened last night was very rare, but there are now concerns after a lot of information being shared online about potential future demonstrations that we will see another reaction from the Muslim South Asian community here in Birmingham. They'll go again, they'll gather again, and there is that renewed fear that after the police failure, frankly, last night to deal with that masked mob marching with machetes towards a pub, that those demonstrations and those risks could reappear in Yardley.
Much indeed. Charlie Peters there in Birmingham at the scene of those events last night. Thank you, Charlie. It's quite incredible, isn't it, how these types of things are just live streamed constantly on social media. You've got so many people just there with their cameras, live streaming the whole thing, showing people they're getting their likes, they're getting their clicks, they're getting their little gifts that you get on social media from people watching, and that just encourages more and more people to come down. Same with the protests on the far right or whatever, you know, just encouraging more and more people to take part.
Yeah, it could well be motivating them. Now, coming up, a teen in Yorkshire says she is lucky to be alive after being mauled by a 50-kilogram Rescue XL bully dog whilst working even at an animal shelter. We'll bring you that story after this.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. Most people will be familiar with French artists such as Auguste Renoir, Claude Monet and Camille Pissarro, who with others made up the Impressionist movement of the late 19th century. But we are probably less familiar with the British contingent of the Impressionists, artists like Frank Bramley, Elizabeth Armstrong Forbes and Walter Langley, amongst many others. David Messam is on a mission to change that. I'm joined by David Messam and by Patrick Duffy, an esteemed archivist. These people we're talking about, are they really Impressionists? I mean, I assume they're British, but are they Impressionists?
I think we had the same query when we wrote a book about the whole thing in '85, actually. And we were the book nearly went out as The Garden of Bright Images, actually, though my author then, Laura Wortley, was quite insistent that it should be called The Garden of Bright Images, but I thought it'd probably be put in the gardening section, actually. So, you know, the question you ask is what is on other people's minds, too, actually. Have we got Impressionism in this country? I think for me, as I used to do quite a lot of shopping, if you like, in America, looking for English pictures out there, and they've got American Impressionism, and I'm quite happy with it, but the English are different.
Were they friends and colleagues? Were they collaborators with the French Impressionists?
Broadly speaking, British Impressionism is, as we term it, is the post-Impressionist movement. So they were certainly inspired by the French Impressionist movement as it was, but they came later. They travelled around Europe and became attuned to en plein air painting, so painting outdoors, and that's what they brought over with them. We call it British realism, but there's a focus.
British realism, I kind of recognise.
Yes.
I mean, that's exactly what that looks like.
The People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled.
Lovely. Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, we'll finish the show with something a little bit different. A Yorkshire teenager says she's lucky to be alive after being mauled by a 50-kilogram rescue XL bully dog whilst working at an animal shelter.
Yeah, Jelana Milner was the victim of a savage attack which left her hospitalised. But despite the trauma she endured, she has spoken out against a ban on the breed.
Well, our Yorkshire reporter Anna Riley has the story, and just as a warning, this report does contain some graphic images.
Animal lover Jelana Milner feared she was going to die after being mauled by an XL bully. She was left with serious injuries to her leg and chest and needed emergency surgery. The attack at a rescue centre where Jelana worked lasted for 5 terrifying minutes.
I thought he was just going to bite me and let go, like you see with everyone else at work when we've all got bitten at some point. But he never actually let go, so then it took a second to realise you're probably going to die. And then you can't really feel the pain of it. You can just feel like the sensation of him biting you. And I was watching him bite me, I couldn't do anything. All I could think about was my mum in the moment, the people that I loved. I've never really thought about it dying like that before.
The assault has left the teenager with permanent nerve damage and emotional trauma.
I can wake up throughout the nights with a dream that a dog's just latched onto me or bitten me or anything like that, and I'd wake up hyperventilating. There's moments where I'm on the street and I see like a bully or something, and it plays in my mind again about what happened. And I went to go see this lady with a big fancy name, and she said that I have this thing where it's like a survival instinct. I'm always thinking about how I'm going to die in a situation. And she said that's located in the back of the brain and it's never going to go away.
It's against the law to sell, give away, abandon or breed from an XL bully, and illegal to own an XL bully without an exemption certificate. But despite what she went through, Jelana disagrees with the ban on the breed.
I think they should all be given a chance and shouldn't be put to sleep just because they're XLs. That's discrimination in a way. Some people think it's just in the brain, it's just like bred into them. There's like a big debate about it, which I suppose to some level could be true. But then again, I think the biggest impact is how they're brought up as a dog, the trauma that they've been through.
It's Jelana's dream to work with animals, and she refuses to let her ordeal stop her. Anna Riley, GB News, Wakefield.
That must have been absolutely terrifying.
Absolutely, I just can't even imagine. And those injuries that we saw, if you're watching on television, were just incredible, incredibly serious as well. If you're watching on, or if you're listening even on radio, then do have a look on our social media channels for that package from Anna.
Yeah, indeed, and such a sweet young woman there as well. But that's it for today. Thank you very much, Cameron Walker. It's been an absolute delight.
Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed myself. Hopefully I can come back one day.
Yes, and do stay tuned. If you missed, Patrick Christie's was on the show a little bit earlier to tease up this interview he's got this evening from 9 o'clock with Dame Priti Patel. She, of course, is in the running for the next Tory leader. She's apparently scathing about how Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper are handling the violent unrest in this country, the violent disorder. So you're going to want to tune into that exclusive. I believe it's her first TV interview from 9 o'clock tonight.
And she also talks about Elon Musk and his Twitter spat with Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer as well. So lots to look forward to there. Another huge congratulations to Keely Hodgkinson, who won gold, of course, at the 800 metres. So well done to her.
Don't tell us we don't ever bring you good news. But up next, it is Dawn Newsom covering Martin Dobney, who I believe is in the Isle of Wight.
we could be calling you with the news that you've won our latest Great British giveaway, an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash. David from Kent was our last big winner. Listen to what he had to say about getting that winning call.
Hi, I'm David from Kent and I won £15,000 and it couldn't have come at a better time. I was gobsmacked. What have you got to lose for what it costs? In fact, I've done it again this week, so I'd recommend it to anybody.
For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled. Lovely.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News.